Hi, Mark. Can you hear us?
I am indeed here.
Could you say that again so I can adjust our volume?
And I see your smiling face, Jennifer.
Oh. Where's the... There we go. Let's see how that works.
That's fine.
You doing okay today?
So far, so good.
Yeah.
I see that agenda for the Eastern Idaho water storage.
Recording in progress.
No, I gotta go. I think it's just Jay Raybould.
Yeah, Jay Raybould.
So, and we're just ignore that. Yeah. So, I was trying to do it with my F1 key, F2 key. Okay, got it.
I'm certainly mark on.
Mark's on it.
Rich, is he ready? Okay. Okay, we would like to call the meeting to order. This is Idaho Water Resource Board meeting, number 9-25. This is the work session. It's being held Hilton Garden Inn in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and being live streamed on YouTube. And somebody's calling me. Lieutenant Governor, I'll get back to him. Okay, the first item of business is roll call.
Mr. Barker?
Here.
Ms. Cole-Hansen?
Here.
Mr. Gibbs?
Here.
Mr. McMahon? Here. Mr. Olmstead?
Here.
Mr. Stevenson?
Here.
Mr. Van Stone?
Here.
And Chairman Raybould.
Here. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. The next item on the agenda is Shoshone Bank Water Bank comments. Mr. Patton.
I have Mary Condon with staff, who is on by video conference from Boise, introduce those comments, and then Gail Martin from the tribes is here to make those comments.
Okay, welcome, Mary.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have some static coming in on my side, so I just want to be sure. So this morning, I'm just going to talk about some comments that have been submitted on behalf of the Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Water Supply Bank Rule Negotiated Rulemaking. As you're aware, the Water Resource Board is responsible for the operation and management of the Water Supply Bank pursuant to Section 42-1762 Idaho Code, which includes adopting rules and regulations governing the management, control, delivery, and use, and distribution of water to and from the water supply bank. The tribes operate a water bank for their tribal stored water for off-reservation rentals through their tribal water bank, which is administered by the tribe's rental pool committee. This was granted through the ratification of the 1990 Fort Hall Agreement and subsequently adopted by the Water Resource Board through the Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Water Supply Bank Rules, which are IDAPA 370204. We received both internal and external stakeholder comments through this negotiated rulemaking in the first and second revisions of the Strawman Tribal Bank Rules. The tribes, in collaboration with Westwater Research, have submitted written comments via email on July 8th. And item 3 of the written comments is requesting that the board consider modifying Rule 55 term of rentals with their and they've provided suggested language. Rule 55 of the Tribal Bank Rules, as adopted by the board in 1992, allows their rental pool committee to rent water for up to 5 years, and any requests over 5 years are subject to negotiations between the tribes and the Water Resource Board. So I'm going to present these written comments from Brett Bovey from Westwater Research on behalf of the tribes. And then I believe Gail Martin is present, and she is representing the tribes and will be available for additional comments. And then I'm also going to follow this up with just an evaluation of what these proposed changes would look like and my evaluation of the impact that would have. So this is just the email that I received and from Brett, and it says that these comments are provided for these tribal bank rules, and that the tribes appreciate the time that that IDWR has taken to revise and improve upon the tribal water supply bank rules, and that they feel that the current draft represents an improved rule set, which is really good to hear. Coming down to item number 3, which is what I'm presenting to you, is this Rule 55 term of rentals. Their comments say that the agreement does not include any limitation on the term of tribal storage rentals, and that the tribes would like to have the ability to evaluate rental agreements longer than 5 years without receiving specific approval from the Water Resource Board. They also say that the 5-year limitation on storage rentals is found in the water supply bank rules, which are not directly referenced in the agreement. The 5-year limitation is not referenced in the agreement, but it is referenced in statute under 42-1762. And it appears that the department has adopted the 5-year limit as part of the rental pool policies in relation to potential forfeiture stated under 42-222. The tribal water rights, including storage rights, are not subject to the same forfeiture risk as the other state water rights per the terms of the agreement. They also state that the tribe is willing to provide notification to the board of any lease that exceeds a 5-year term, but is formally requesting that the requirements of the board to approve be removed from the water bank rules, the tribal's water bank rules. Their suggested change to text would read, the committee may rent tribal stored water for any period of time. Any request to rent water for a period in excess of 5 years will require that the tribes provide notice to the Water Resource Board 30 days prior to a rental application being submitted to the committee for consideration. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I could hand it over to Gail unless anybody has any questions for me at this time.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mary before we? I think we're good, Mary, if you want to introduce Gail, or she can. Wherever you want, wherever you're comfortable.
I'm short, so. Okay, my name's Gail Martin. I am the interim water resources director for the Shoshone tribes. And first of all, I'd like to thank the opportunity to be able to provide comments on the proposed changes to the Shoshone tribal water bank rules. It must be remembered that in 1999, the Fort Hollywood Water Rights Agreement provided the creation for the Shoshone tribes tribal water bank. The purpose of the bank is to provide a mechanism for the tribes to realize the value of their federally storage water rights, resulting from the settlement of all of its water rights to the upper Snake River Basin. In the agreement, the state of Idaho agreed not to take any action that would interfere with the nature, scope, and spirit and purposes of the Shoshone Tribes Water Bank. We've had a chance to review the proposed amendments and have provided oral comments at the public meetings held so far. Some of the comments we've made that you haven't heard about were comments made to section 0401 rental priorities. This refers to the Fort Hall water users' right of first refusal to tribal storage rentals. This organization existed at the time of the agreement. However, it's no longer an active organization. In that we don't have the ability to provide notice, we would suggest removing that requirement from the water bank rules. Next, section 040.03, content of approved rental agreements. This item requires the legal description of the point of diversion and place of use. We suggest that this item be revised to a description of the intended use of rented water. That being that the tribes have several rental agreements that have been for mitigation purposes, and there isn't a specific place of use for those mitigation purposes. And as Mary talked about, the term of rentals is one that we're concerned about. That was never never in the water agreement to keep that to a 5-year lease. We would like to have that revised, and the tribes are willing to provide notice to the Idaho Water Resource Board for any leases over 5 years. And with that, that's the comments for the tribes.
Okay, board members, any questions for Ms. Martin? Al?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Martin, a couple of things. Were the changes that you requested in the first two sections accommodated by the changes that we made, or are they still outstanding requests?
I believe they're still outstanding.
Okay. And then with respect to the term of the rental, the purpose with the notice to viewers, you would give us notice, and then what would we do?
That would be the only purpose of the tribe wants to be able to consider rentals over 5 years without having to come to the board for approval.
Right, but you said you would, I mean, your proposal is that you would give the board notice that it's going to be more than 5 years. And so then what do we do with that notice? Do we have the chance to evaluate that proposed rental for potential injury?
You'd be able to provide comment. We've said we would provide notice 30 days prior to entering into any agreements. The board has concerns. They can let us know.
So, just, if I understand correctly, you kind of want to flip how it works. Right now, if you want to lease longer than 5 years, you have to come to the water board and explain to the water board why you want to do that, and get a waiver to have a longer term lease. And you're suggesting that the tribe have the ability to lease for whatever period they want. And should they choose to lease for longer than 5 years, they would give us notice, and then we could come back and with our thoughts on whether that was a good idea or not, that the final decision would rest with the tribe. Is that correct?
Yes. Also, be advised that the committee is the Snake River Water Master, Water Master, is on the tribal rentals.
Brian.
Mr. Chairman, Gail, I probably should know this, but in the agreement, is the tribe able to rent water below Milner, or is it like the other water departmentals have to be above?
The tribe is able to rent below Milner out and without an environmental qualification.
Without any last to fill
Correct.
provision. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for Mary, if I could. So,
Yeah, sure.
Right now, Mary, the way the rental works is it comes to you, and it still has to be evaluated for potential injury.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you very well. I have static. I'm so sorry.
Use your outdoor voice, Al.
I'm so.
So could you evaluate the potential rentals or the rental proposals for injury?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, currently, I am outside of reviewing that. So for the Tribes Bank, that would be a review by their rental pool committee, but the department, aside from the Water District 01 Water Master, is not part of the evaluation.
How does that work, Jeff?
How does
the water bank live?
well, as I understand it, and I know enough about this just to be extremely dangerous, the tribe has their own rental pool for water supply bank, and they have their block of water and they rent it. Now, I am not aware that they have any leases or have had leases longer than 5 years. The tribe is not. So I think the tribe has been just operating and renting that water as they see fit, but not for periods longer than 5 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they've sent much of a past Milner. It's all basically been used in basin.
Yes.
Okay, so the potential injury, I don't think the Water District 01 Water Master would find that there would be injury from those rents.
Well, I'm just asking for the process. If we have a review every 5 years of potential injury, then we can get a handle on it. If it's unlimited, how do you evaluate injury of something that might take place 30 years from today? That's my question.
And you believe I have the answer to that?
Well, I believe somebody at Water District 01 would be able to, maybe it's the water master, maybe it's the rental committee, I don't know, but it just seems like we need to make sure we don't create a problem that would prevent us from evaluating whether or not there's injury in the future from a very, very long-term or even permanent rental situation.
And I would like to advise the board that Tribes has been very conservative on its rentals. I mean, we're concerned with carryover water into next year. The storage water also provides water for the reservation. And so we watch and make sure that all those are covered before we rent any water. So we have been very conservative, and there's not, my belief is that you're not going to empty reservoirs if this is removed.
Okay, so any other questions? Mary, I have a question. What's our timeline here? We've put these rules out for comment, and then when do we have to finalize these rules? What's our window?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. These rules as a proposed rule will come back to you towards the end of next month by Eric Bowe. He will be
Okay.
presenting those.
So we can take these comments that we've received from the tribe under advisement and make changes as we see fit before we finalize the rule and submit them to the legislature. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've heard what you said. I've also heard Mr. Barker's concerns. I think that we need to work on getting an answer to Mr. Barker's question, and I appreciate that the tribe has really taken into account not putting an additional strain on the reservoir system, and that water's been used above Milner. And your comments about changing the rule that says what's the purpose? Because a lot of your water is rented for mitigation, and that I think that's a good catch. And then your first change is gone out of my head already. But we will give these a careful review, and I would assume that you're available if we have additional questions between now and when we actually have to take action, that we can reach out to you and visit with you more about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
maybe that you want to refer that to the Water Supply Bank Committee.
Okay.
Ask them to take a look at it before these rules would be finalized.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's what we'll do, but we will give this a good hard look and see what we can come up with. Okay. All right. Anything else on that? You're good, Mary?
Mr. Chairman, I just have my evaluation, just a memo here if you would like me to go into this before I complete my agenda item.
Yeah. Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so evaluating item 3 in the written comments received from the tribes, that the tribe is willing to provide notification to the board of any lease or rental that exceeds a 5-year term, but formally requesting that the requirement for the board approval be removed from the bank rules. And we've heard twice now what this suggested change is, but this second paragraph just underlines the changes that would be from the existing written rule as it is to what it would be. So it would change for 5 years to any period of time. And then instead of negotiations, it would require that the tribes provide notice to the board 30 days prior to the rental being submitted to the committee for consideration. In my discussions with our Deputy Attorney General and reviewing these and my experience of this as well, the current requirement for the tribal water bank rules for requests exceeding 5 years being brought before the board for negotiations is consistent with the 5-year limitation on the terms of rentals pursuant to, and this code is actually 42-1762 Idaho code, which the board will determine term lengths, and Rule 40 of the Water Supply Bank rules in IDAPA 370203-040 for rental committees, that the specific approval by the board in both the board's bank and local rental pool committees. The proposed language by the tribes to provide only notice to the board in excess of 5 years it may not provide the board with an opportunity to negotiate any changes to the rental proposed for longer than 5 years. And then, as Ms. Martin had spoken to, in the 1994 Hall Agreement, the cooperation and collaboration between the parties is prioritized under 3 different articles, where there will be a continuation of good faith cooperation among the parties to this agreement, that the state agrees not to take any action that will interfere with the nature, scope, spirit, and purposes of the tribal water bank, and that the parties agree to continue cooperative efforts to effectively manage water resources and fairly resolve disputes arising in this agreement without resorting to litigation. Finally, I'll just conclude this with a continued requirement for the rule with negotiations between the board and the tribes for rental terms proposed longer than 5 years is not an extraordinary requirement or burden. The requirement ensures proper review and negotiations have taken place to prevent potential injury due to shortfalls in dry years when fill may not occur, or changes to administration of storage and natural flow rights in Idaho, without any specificity to the tribes or their storage rights. Again, this goes across the board's bank and all the other rental pools that we have. We have this 5-year limitation. This current requirement in rule also allows the board to negotiate any conditions of approval or requiring any periodic scheduled reviews of an approved rental to consider future adjustments or changes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right, well, we'll get a water supply bank committee meeting on the calendar and look at these requests. Okay. All right. Next up, Bear River Basin cloud seeding proposal from Utah.
Yes, I believe Jonathan Jennings from the state of Utah is going to lead off and, on this presentation, then with a follow-up from Caitlin Swanson of our staff.
Okay. Welcome, Jonathan. Can you hear us okay?
I hear you guys well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Jonathan Jennings again with the Utah Division of Water Resources. I am the staff meteorologist and also oversee the cloud seeding program in the state of Utah. So to get started, I want to give a brief overview of our project in Utah. On the right, you can see our target area. Basically, we cover all of the mountain ranges across the state of Utah with the exception of like the LaSalle Mountains near the Moab area. Of note is the Uintas program, because that's already residing within the Bear River Basin. So we actually have infrastructure in place for that already. And then also up towards the Cache Valley where we have infrastructure in place already. And what's nice about these two areas already is that we do have local groundwater conservancy districts that sponsor the cloud seeding program. So all the ground-based operations in these areas for the Bear River program are already funded. Also, looking at the funding history, the state of Utah primarily has been providing a 50-50 cost share to these local sponsors. We also do receive some supplemental money from the lower basin states of the Colorado River. And then when the Great Salt Lake hit the lowest level on record in 2022, our legislature responded by increasing our cloud seeding budget from roughly $350,000 a year to $5 million a year. So deciding how to implement this additional funds has been quite the challenge, but I think we got to a good place where we're doing really good work in Utah. Here's a quick list at some of our sponsors and contractors. The main operator in the state of Utah is the company called North American Weather Consultants, which has recently been acquired by Rainmaker Technology Corporation. We also hold contracts with the Utah Climate Center. They do a lot of feasibility studies for us. They also have, they're also helping with our snowscape study, which I'll discuss here briefly. We also have equipment that we purchased from the company Radiometrics, which is out of Colorado, and then a Utah-based company, Campbell Scientific. So our operational program in Utah has always been pretty strong, primarily ground-based, but our research has kind of suffered over the years. And with this additional funding, we wanted to really increase our research program. So we're working in conjunction with the NSF NCAR team, the University of Utah, and Utah State University to do really good evaluations, whether it's modeling or trying to find physical validations using high-resolution X-band radar. And we're also working with a group out of Colorado, Heritage Environmental Consultants, where we're going to be doing a silver iodide study over the next winter. So why the Bear River Basin? I think most of the room probably understands the importance of the Bear River Basin, especially when it comes to the Great Salt Lake. Again, in 2022, we hit our record low, like 4188 elevation. Right now, we're about 4192, and we typically lose about 3 feet during the summer. And the projections have us kind of sitting right around 4190 by the time winter starts. So we're going to be not too far away from that record low once again. So we really need to respond to that. And this program is part of that response. The water that comes into the Great Salt Lake, a lot of it comes from the Bear River Basin, about 60%. And our legislature has decided that cloud seeding is a tool for increasing flows into the Great Salt Lake. So you guys were previously funded a feasibility and design study by the team at NCAR. And it indicated strong feasibility for the Bear River Basin program, but it did also provide a use case for drones. So these charts here are showing your supercool liquid water content, and then between the red lines is the optimal flight zones for aircraft. And you can see the higher areas of yellow kind of reside below that optimal flight area, but they're a little too high for ground-based generators to reach as well. So interestingly enough, this is like the perfect use case for drones. The success is standard, like the WRF weather mod simulations have shown an increase of roughly 200,000 acre feet or more. In this case, we're going to be using drones, so there's going to be a little bit of an unknown, and I'll discuss that briefly in a minute. We already discussed kind of the infrastructure that's in place in the state of Utah. We're going to have a fully remote operated program by November 1st. So every one of the generators in the state of Utah, including those in the Bear River Basin, will be remotely operated. This gives us flexibility to optimize the siting, not needing a person like a landowner to go outside and turn on like a manual generator. Also, we'll be able to get these up into higher elevation areas. We will perform site optimization on these ground-based units per the NCAR feasibility study. But also, we are going to be funding a full drone program. We are really committed, the state of Utah, really committed to learning more about the efficacy of the drones and how they work. So we have kind of dived down into aircraft seeding the last 3 years in the state of Utah, and there's just too many safety issues, especially across the Cache Valley, that we decided to terminate that program and look more into the efficacy of drone work. We also have a radiometer that's in the Cache Valley just south of Utah State University. So this radiometer can measure liquid water in the cloud. It gives us additional information for more precise cloud targeting, but also can be used for an evaluation tool as well. So the state of Utah's Water Year 26 investment is $3 million. This is legislatively mandated that we operate this program. Our focus really, again, is on the drone-based operation since our ground-based program is already built out. And the focus really is on the capabilities, the efficacy, and then the water production. So this will be treated like an operational program where we really hope that we don't miss any opportunities. But really the biggest factor here is trying to figure out exactly the capabilities of the drones and the efficacy of the drone program. Again, we'll optimize our ground-based program, and then if we do get the full funding from the state of Idaho, we'll start to implement the ground program that will be within the state of Idaho. And then we're looking at evaluation. So the company will do their own evaluations, and that'll be compared to a third-party evaluation at a later date. So the first option, and Caitlin's going to go into more details with the financial numbers, but first option, we will bring 12 ground-based generators to the state of Idaho. You can see on the map to the left, that'll be the focus area of where we put these generators. Group A is actually already built out. We do have authorization to have a few generators in the state of Idaho, and those are already residing there. But we'll be building out the Group B, C, D, and parts of Group E. And for anything over the 12 ground-based generators, Utah will offer to provide additional generators for these areas. The NCAR feasibility study did state that the ground-based program increases the precipitation or the seeding effect by an additional 209%. So this is an important part in an operational program to have this ground-based program implemented. Now, if the state of Idaho decides to go half in, we will not build out that ground program. Instead, our focus will primarily be on the drones. So we'll continue to do the full drone program, get our flight tracks in, and then the state of Idaho will be more focused on the validation efforts from the third party. Caitlin will discuss that in greater detail next. So some justification. The Cache Valley area, we actually did fund 75 flight hours for drones in that area with the really the whole idea of looking at the capabilities. Can these drones survive icing conditions? And we had no incidents. And this is with a older generation drone. The company Rainmaker took some of these drones, built them out to a larger version 2, which is like the third iteration of the drone. And they continue testing these drones in Austria in an ice chamber. But also they have a huge team down in Argentina right now, not wasting any time, continuing to do their testing as well. And all things so far have been greatly successful. Also, the Utah snowscape study that we're producing this winter is going to be looking at the efficacy of drones as well. So we have great support from the team at NCAR on the work that's happening in the drones, and they're really excited about the capabilities and the use case available for drones. We'll be doing a lot of seeding down there as well as looking at the efficacy, and we'll again have high resolution radars to validate all the work that we're doing. From Utah's stance, this is a great opportunity to learn more about the drone technology. We do have a great desire to be the first program to fully implement drones operationally. And we also want to show other states a template on how we can look at water basins as opposed to political boundaries. So this is another political project that is pretty interesting. So what would be next? I think success from this one-year pilot project would be a long-term Bear River Basin fully operational cloud seeding program. I do think that success will also result in more collaborative work. So by showing that template that these states can get along, whether that's Wyoming working closer with us in Utah or you in Idaho, or you guys working closer with Montana and us Colorado, there's areas that we can certainly do cost shares and focus on river basins as opposed to just the political boundaries. I really think success would look like a more affordable validation technique than what's already offered from the scientific community. The validation, we want to be able to show volumes of water production. And we also want to kind of, take some motivation behind the Snowy study that was done in Idaho and see that seeding signature from a drone as well. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to ask questions, or if you want Caitlin to continue, we'll just go that way.
Okay, board members, any questions for Jonathan? Appears to be none. Dean, I'm sorry.
So, looking at these proposals, it appears to be that the drone technology, we're kind of in the infant stages of it just to see if it works. Is it substantially cheaper than putting an airplane in the air?
In the long term, yes, it will be substantially cheaper, but right now there's infrastructure costs that have to be put up front. So the building of the drones and then the validation efforts behind it. But yeah, we're not using flares either, so that reduces the cost as well.
Okay, good. Brian?
Mr. Chairman, Jonathan, so when you talk about the, in the future, full build out of the drone program, are we talking hundreds of drones, or it seems like the area covered is fairly small area in any one drone flight. So it would take a lot of them, I guess, my question.
Yeah, the current setup that we have right now is going to utilize 32 total drones. I could see that we have some struggles in covering the whole area. So I think in a year 2 or year 3, it would be increasing the amount of drones we use.
Okay. Pat, were you just holding your hand up, or do you have a question? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
So, Jonathan, maybe I missed it, but I'm quite sure I understand how these drones work without flares. What's this mechanism for seeding those clouds without a flare?
I apologize, Al. I didn't hear you too well, but I think your question was, how do these drones work or the seeding work without flare technology? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So we're using a powder version of silver iodide. So there's a dispersion kind of it's hard to kind of explain, but it just disperses a powder version of silver iodide at a certain flow rate. So that's how we're getting around by not using flares. So your typical standard flare in like a smaller flare is going to be 40 or 50 grams of material, but you're only getting about 5 to maybe 10 grams of silver iodide in that flare. So in this case, you're going to get a full 50 grams of silver iodide, so we'll be able to impact more of the cloud more efficiently.
Right?
Just one more, Jeff, and Jonathan. So the drone operator has to be within line of sight, or can one operator do multiple drones, or the range, I guess, of the drone is kind of the question.
Yeah, there will be a total of 8 teams that are going to be somewhat mobile. So based on feedback from the meteorologist that's operating the program, they'll kind of tell the drone team where exactly to go. And then Rainmaker has acquired the necessary permits from the FAA to go in cloud. So we don't have to have that visual line of sight for this program. We're actually going to be able to go into cloud and see directly within the supercool liquid water layer.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Dale.
Jonathan, does each drone have a ground operator? Or do you keep it in track?
Each drone is going to have, each operator is going to have 4 drones. So there will be someone actually operating the drone. And then after the lifetime of that drone's ability to stay airborne, it'll come down and you'll have a second team member who's swapping batteries, swapping the seating material. But we'll have 4 drones, so we'll be able to continue to do a rotation, so we're not missing any time up there.
So how many people will be involved in the whole process on the ground when you start flying drones?
With 8 teams, I think we're going to be around 24 total people that's actually operating the drones. But we'll have a team of meteorologists back at the office that will be conducting the operation in terms of letting the drone operators know where to go.
So is that better than having a pilot go up in a plane? How many people would be involved with that?
Yeah, with one single aircraft, you're going to have 2 pilots. You'll have a co-pilot and then the chief pilot. The issue that I found with aircraft is you're limited by the flight time. So if you're up for 2 or 3 hours and you land, you're missing opportunities by landing, whether it's to get refuel or to reflare. With the drones, they'll be charging batteries on the fly, so they'll be able to be out there during the entire duration of the storm.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. The drone thing's new to us, so we do have questions. And now we're gonna
hear from
Caitlin
from staff.
Welcome,
Yes.
Caitlin.
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'll share my screen here. All right. Are you able to see the slideshow view of the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you for having me here today. I will be presenting to the board some options for the Bear River proposal alongside Jonathan. Let's see. Maybe next slide. Yeah, as Jonathan has stated, the Utah Division of Water Resources has proposed a 1-year interstate collaborative cloud seeding project in the Bear. I'll just walk through some proposal details, overview of the project area, and then elaborate on a few of the options for the board's consideration. Yeah, and some of this presentation may echo what Jonathan has already presented. But yeah, the proposal project would be this interstate initiative conducted over the 2025-2026 winter season throughout the Bear River Basin regions, both in Idaho and in Utah. The project design, again, as Jonathan stated, was derived from the Bear River Basin feasibility and design study conducted in 2022 by the National Center for Atmospheric Research, commonly referred to as NCAR. And this feasibility and design study was funded by the Idaho Water Resource Board. And this feasibility and design study investigated the cloud seeding potential in Idaho, then zoomed in on the Bear River Basin and provided a detailed climatological analysis of the Bear to identify cloud seeding potential in the area. And based on this analysis, NCAR developed a preliminary project design for the Bear River Basin, and Utah's proposal has directly incorporated all of these recommendations from the feasibility design study into the pilot project. As Jonathan stated, Utah legislature has approved $3 million in funds to advance a cloud seeding project in the Bear, which provides a unique opportunity for Idaho to participate in cloud seeding operations in the Bear River Basin this year. Utah has requested a total of $1.9 million from the board for a full project build out of the collaborative program. And if a full project build out was decided upon, this would include a hybrid operational approach, as Jonathan has mentioned, utilizing unmanned aerial systems, which are otherwise known as drones, and the remote ground-based generators. And this cloud seeding equipment is fabricated and operated by Utah's operator, Rainmaker Technologies. And specifically, Jonathan has already kind of touched on this a bit, is the project, a full build out would incorporate 8 of the drone teams, and which would include 32 drones operating along flight tracks recommended by NCAR, and then include 12 newly fabricated remote ground-based generators sited in Idaho, plus the existing ground generators already existing in the Uinta region of Utah. And this proposal would also incorporate various weather instrumentation to support both internal validation efforts by Utah's operator and help with the evaluation and validation of a third-party entity. And staff in Utah have identified the importance of a third-party evaluation of the pilot project, as cloud seeding operations in this basin specifically would be new, and the operations would incorporate a novel technology. So this third-party evaluation would help inform future decisions. And so Utah and staff have included this neutral third-party evaluation into the proposal to be conducted by a scientific qualified entity. For example, this could be NCAR. And so first I wanted to briefly introduce the project area. Can you all see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and so the Bear River Basin spans over Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming, and the Bear system flows north from Utah through Wyoming into Idaho, and then ultimately looping back into Utah. And so the feasibility and design study by NCAR has broken up the Bear River Basin into 2 target regions. And so we have the Uinta region in Utah. And this region is the headwaters of the system. And then the other region is this lower Bear target area, which encompasses the Salt River Range and the Bear River Range. And these 2 ranges are targeted conjunctively, since targeting the lower Bear as a whole was shown to be consistently more effective than trying to individually target each of these ranges. So I'll just refer to this area as the lower Bear from here on out. And a key takeaway from that I'd like to highlight from the NCAR feasibility and design is that the potential seeding effects in this lower Bear area are up to 5 to 6 times more than that of the Uintas. So largely this lower Bear area yields more anticipated benefit than the Uintas, and this is the case for airborne ground seeding. But this will just be a helpful takeaway to keep in mind as I walk through the options summary. And so staff in Utah have collaborated to develop a couple different investment options. And this table shows you a summary of the options, which will have the option number, investment type, approximate cost, what the project would include, and the relative seeding effect. And so the approximate cost does refer to the cost to the board, as Utah has already been approved for the $3 million for the pilot project. And this relative seeding effect shows the potential effect that each option can use. And this percentage takes into account the potential benefit that you may see from specific infrastructure and operations and factors in the region of which those operations would incur. So this is really just calculated to provide an understanding of what benefit could be produced depending on the option. And so option 1 would be a full investment, approximately $1.9 million in costs, full build out, and would yield 100% of the seeding benefit. Option 2 would be a partial investment, approximately $950,000 in cost, a partial proposal build out, removing the use of ground-based generators and about an 85% seeding effect. Option 3 would be a no investment to the board, zero cost to the board, and there would be no proposal build out on the Idaho portion of the Bear River Basin and yield about 15% relative seeding effect. And so,
Interrupt you for just a second. I thought Jonathan said something about adding the ground generators provided a significant increase in the potential increase in precipitation. And here we're looking at a 15% reduction from full build out to partial build out.
Yes.
Those numbers jive. It doesn't quite add up to me.
Yeah, so this would be excluding the 12 new generators. And so this is looking at the relative impact of that group of generators, what it has to the entire project. And this is calculated in averages and a couple other different things. Jonathan, if you want to.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just a quick clarification too is the ground-based program in Utah near the Uinta Basin as well as the Cache Valley is already built out. So this is just a very small portion, about 15%.
Yes.
Okay, so a total ground-based program would be 200% more effective than no ground-based program at all.
Exactly, and I apologize I didn't clarify that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you for the clarification, Jonathan. Yeah, this is just the relative effect of those additional generators. Yeah, and I'll move on into the option summaries and dive into these in a little more detail. Excuse me. So the first option would be, again, this full proposal build out. So the cost to the board would be just over $1.9 million. The cost to Utah would be $3 million for a total project cost of $4.9 million. Idaho would pay 39% of the total project cost. And so this would include the full build out previously stated. In Utah, and staff have developed a cost breakdown for each state that limits any administrative and contractual complexities for each state. So ultimately, Idaho would hold the contract with the scientific entity conducting the third-party evaluation and reimburse Utah for costs of the drone operations and operational overhead. So essentially, we're looking at a 39% portion of the total cost is what Idaho would pay. And so some advantages of this option is it does provide the maximum seeding effect potential. So you could yield about 100% of the seeding effects here since you would build out the full infrastructure. And then it would also include drone operations, and the 12 new generators would be concentrated within the Lower Bear region in Idaho. Again, this is the region that does yield the most anticipated seeding effect. And another advantage of this option is that if the board decides to fund a collaborative project with Utah, there would be a strong framework in place, for future work in the Bear and a strong interstate relationship with Utah established. Some disadvantages is that this option is the most significant financial commitment to the board. And then moving on to option 2. One moment. Okay, so option 2 would be a partial proposal build out. This option is the option recommended by staff. This option would cost the board $950,000. And the cost to Utah would be $3 million for a total project cost of $3.9 million. Idaho would pay 24% of the total project cost. This option includes all of the components in option 1 with the exclusion of those 12 remote ground-based generators. And again, Utah and staff have developed this cost breakdown based on the administrative and contractual ease of each state. And so in this case, Idaho would still hold that third-party evaluation contract, and then Utah would in turn pay an increased portion of the drone operation. So ultimately, Idaho would be paying for the portion of the third-party validation and operational overhead. And this is a total proportion of about 24% of the total cost of the project. And so some advantages of this option is that it is a less costly financial commitment to the board, and still yields a significant amount of seeding potential, up to 85% of anticipated seeding effects, even with the elimination of those new ground-based generators, which account for that 15%. So the total benefit is still substantial. And in this option, the UAS operations would be concentrated again in that lower Bear region, with the most anticipated seeding effects in Idaho. And much like option 1, another perk is that we would have this interstate relationship with Utah established, and it does provide a framework for future interstate collaboration. Some disadvantages is that it does decrease a portion of the seeding potential, that 15%, and it doesn't support the entirety of the proposed pilot project. And staff have collaborated with Utah in the development of this option, and Utah's confirmed that this option still would be feasible for them if the board did decide to move forward with this option. Yeah, Jonathan, if you have anything to add on that, feel free to speak up.
Everything Caitlin said is spot on.
Okay, awesome, perfect. I will continue. Yeah, and so this last option 3 would be no participation from the board. So in this option, there would be no cost to the board. Utah would pay up to $3 million. As Utah's legislator has approved this $3 million cost for a program. This would include the existing ground-based generators in Utah, and would also focus all of the Utah operations in the Uinta range. And so some advantages to this is that there would be no fiscal impact to the board, and Idaho would still receive some of the benefit from this as the Uinta range would be seeded. Some disadvantages is that Idaho would see minimal impacts from the seeding, and since this does eliminate any UAS or ground infrastructure within the lower Bear and focuses those operations in the Uintas. And then lastly, another consideration for this option is that Utah has received funding from legislature this year for operations. And it cannot be guaranteed, that Utah would secure funding for this pilot project from legislature in future years. And with that, I will move forward with throw back the option summary onto the screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Caitlin? Right.
Mr. Chairman, Caitlin, can you hear me all right, Caitlin?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So the 12, so it's full investment. We're getting the 12 new remote operated ground generators.
Yes,
and then,
that's correct.
So if we go with that route, are those generators staying then the next year, or that's to be determined? And then I guess on the or that would be something we decide next year. And in the half option, we still do all of the drone research then, and we still operate the 24, whatever it is, existing ground generators, but has Utah been paying all the cost on those existing generators, and we've been paying nothing historically on them?
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first. Utah has historically been paying for the existing ground-based generators, so the additional costs for the program would go towards, and Jonathan, please jump in if I'm uh, not right with this, but it would go towards the UAS operations and maybe towards ground. Jonathan, if you have any input with that.
If there is a need for those generators to remain in Idaho, there is full expectation that those generators will remain in Idaho. If there's no need for the generators to remain there, then they will likely be implemented in Utah in future years. But if you guys have a use for them, we have no issue with them staying in the state of Utah, state of Idaho. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that is the way that we have broken down the cost for this project is that Utah would essentially hold the ownership of those generators. But again, if the project continued in the Bear, those would continue to be sited in Idaho. But the reason why we wanted to break it down where Utah would hold the ownership for those is because if the Bear does not proceed following this first pilot project, Utah does utilize these generators throughout their state and they can be redistributed into other basins in their state.
Okay. Other questions? Mark, I don't want to ignore you. Do you have any questions?
Well, I don't have particularly questions, Mr. Chairman, but, I obviously want the record to reflect that I'm a Bear River water user, but in terms of the scope of this project, I'm less than 1% of the water use in Bear River or in Idaho. So it does affect me, but I don't think to the extent to which I don't have the ability to vote on these projects.
You're fine. I don't think you're conflicted out. I think we'll put on the record that you're a strong advocate for cloud seeding in general and believe that our program should be expanded in areas where it will benefit water users and everybody.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yeah.
have a question. I'm not quite sure I understand how or if this program is going to utilize the existing Idaho Power ground generators that have the ability to seed in parts of the Bear when the weather patterns are appropriate.
Caitlin, is there any intertie between this program and the Upper Snake program that's operated by Idaho Power? Have we had any conversations with them about potentially assisting when the weather conditions are just right with their ground-based equipment for efforts in the Bear?
Yes, staff have been in conversation with Idaho Power about utilizing those generators. Idaho Power is still in deliberation about how that would work specifically, so there's more conversation to have. They haven't provided us with a there's still more to work on essentially with that. With the current timeline, negotiations with that would be cutting it a little close considering operations would begin in November. So that's still something that staff are in conversation with Idaho Power, but that decision has not been made.
And as a follow-up, does the design of where the ground generators are going to go under this program or may go under this program, how does that mesh with where the ground generators are with the Idaho Power program so we're not double seeding particular areas?
Yeah, so I can, let me see, I think I have here we go. So all of the ground generators that would be implemented for this Bear program are situated in these locations. The Idaho Power equipment is kind of in this region right here. If you can, if you could still see my cursor. And so those generators, they can only benefit the bear under specific wind directions, and that depends on each storm. It'll vary depending on the characteristics of the storm. So ultimately, they'll be able to target somewhat different. These generators will target the entire lower bear region, and they can consistently target the lower bear region, which is why they were chosen and selected for in the NCAR study and tested. But yeah, as far as the Idaho Power generators go, that's we have not made any. But we're in conversation with Idaho Power, but it isn't that isn't absolute that those will be able to be utilized this year specifically.
Mr. Chairman, there's a possibility we could have additional costs associated if we chose to go ahead with the Idaho Power system when the wind conditions are this way.
I would assume that there would be costs associated with additional operations of Idaho Power's equipment. Okay, so one more question from me, Caitlin. This 1.9 million is any of that capital outlay? So like if we decide to continue this program, if we do the full build out in year 2, is it still 1.9 million-ish, or would there be less of a financial obligation in year 2 for the full build out because the ground generators are already there?
Yes, we haven't developed a budget for option 2 quite yet, but we anticipate that the costs would be less as all of the infrastructure would have been fabricated already. And again, Utah would hold the rights, the ownership of those, but if we continued in the project area, those would be reserved for Idaho. And continue.
Are we in essence just paying Utah to operate their generators on our behalf? Is that where the additional $1 million comes into play?
Right. So the additional $1 million comes into play since we would be paying for some of the operational costs of the ground generators. And then we would also be paying for a higher portion of the drone operations. And with the inclusion of the ground infrastructure, that does increase the operational overhead. So that number does go up a bit. So that's why that cost is a little more, is 1.9 million.
Okay, so one more follow-up. If I understand what you just said correctly, full build-out, we get more drones, more drone operations than under the partial investment option 2.
With option 2, option 1 and option 2 both possess the same amount of drone operations. So with option 2, we will see the exact same drone build out as we would in option 1. Option 2 specifically eliminates the 12 ground-based generators.
Joanne.
Mr. Chairman?
Is there an expectation that the additional water generated in Idaho could be used by Idaho water users? Or is there an agreement that all of the water generated would have to flow to Utah? Is there any agreement?
We have not developed, this proposal doesn't incorporate any sort of agreement. I think that might be a little out of the scope of this proposal specifically. I don't know if, Brian, if you have maybe any input on that.
This is Jeff. We're not going to color the water any different color. The water's going to come down and it's going to fill water rights in priority, including refilling Bear Lake. And whatever benefits accrue to Idaho water right holders accrue to Idaho water right holders. Whatever benefits accrue to Utah accrue to Utah. Is how I'm looking at this. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds great.
Okay.
That's built into Idaho law.
Okay. And Mark, I'm getting to you.
Yeah, what I'm, two points. Idaho law, we literally copied the Utah statute. So Utah statute does the same thing Idaho does about any water derived from cloud seeding will be treated as any existing water or natural flow. So it would go to same water rights holders that were there in priority. Secondly, if we were to go with the full build out with the 12 additional ground-based generators, Idaho Power has told us those generators cost about $50,000 each. Is that about the same cost that Utah puts on those generators? So if the 12 generators is 600,000 of that just for equipment, for the cost of the ground-based generators, I guess that's my question.
The cost of each generator for, are you asking if the cost compares to Idaho Power's generators? Was that the question? Sorry, I lost you for a second.
That is essentially my question. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, you might be able to answer that question as
Yeah.
how much each individual generator costs.
Each individual generator costs about $51,000. So it's comparable to Idaho Power's and then far less than say like Desert Research Institute's generators.
Okay. Any follow-up, Mark?
So I'm good. Thank you.
Dale.
How many generators are now operating in Idaho from Utah? Ground generators. Caitlin, do you have it? You know?
How many of Utah's ground generators currently operate in Idaho? Was that the question?
Yes.
There's currently 3 authorized generators in the state of Idaho in the Cache Valley agreement.
Are they in the southern part of the basin or northern?
So those generators that already exist, 3 of them are part of this group A right here. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Well, how long have you been operating in Idaho?
Utah has, Jonathan, maybe you want to answer that question. You probably have the most specific date.
Yeah, it precedes my time here, but I know that we've had manual generators there for at least the better part of the last 5 or 6 years, but it probably goes back further than that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brian.
One follow-up. So Jonathan, I guess our expectation, I think we need to seed the bear. I think we need to experiment on the drone technology and find out if and how well it's going to work. And I guess we would expect in this group D, C, and B that when the storms are coming out of the south, that's going to augment snowpack on the Snake River side of the range also. And you would run those even if the storm was going to, obviously it's going up into that range between the Snake and the Bear. It benefits both groups. So those would run the same if it's going to benefit into the Snake as if it was going to benefit into the Bear.
Yeah, that is exactly right. There are potential with southwesterly flows that some of these generators have spillover into the upper Snake. So yeah, that is certainly possible.
And those would be at higher elevation than the existing ones you have now because they would be, the remote base.
Yeah, our manual generators typically are around like the 6,000, maybe 7,000 foot level, but we have several now that are up over like 8,000 to 8,500. So we'll just have to dig deep in the feasibility and design study from NCAR and figure out exactly the elevations they have on these. I do know there's a team already working on that right now, and these are going to be pretty high up.
And then just one follow-up, and sorry to be, to get in the weeds, but does Wyoming have senior water rights on the Bear that could divert a significant portion of this water from the Uintas, or is there really minimal?
The Wyoming side's pretty minimal. We were hoping to get Wyoming involved in this as well, but they have their own legislative struggles right now that they're going through. So that could be a potential collaborative effort in the coming years should Wyoming receive their funding back from the state.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we're good. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Caitlin. We'll be taking this up on the board agenda tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
how
you,
are we
members of
doing,
the board.
group? We need a break? Are we okay? We're okay? Right. Okay, we'll go on to Anderson Ranch Dam Raise. Mr. Patton, who's
Chris Keith from the Bureau of Reclamation will be joining us by video conference.
okay, Chris, hey, welcome. I think you're still muted. At least that's what I see. There you go.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over to Mr. Alcorn.
Okay.
That's all.
Ryan, we're not hearing you.
Yeah.
Good morning, all. Can you hear me now?
There we go. We got you loud and clear.
Awesome. Well, good morning, all. I thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We appreciate the opportunity to brief you today. I continue to serve as the acting area manager for the Snake River Area Office and as the Anderson Ranch Dam Raise project sponsor for reclamation. I'm joined today, as you know, by Chris Keith, our senior project manager, as well as Pitcock, who's a project manager supporting the project and focusing primarily on the reservoir rim mitigation work. I want to sincerely thank Chris and Brianna for the work they're doing to support this project and for the project team as a whole. The work that they're doing and the project team picking up where things were left with some folks that left reclamation and other areas to kind of leave us in a bit of a lurch to keep this project moving, but Chris and Brianna are doing fantastic to keep it moving. So really appreciate all the work that they're doing. For today, we are going to provide updates on the project, which will focus on the staff losses that I just spoke about, as well as schedule impacts associated with that, design progress, and where things sit with environmental compliance. So with that, I'll turn it over to the experts and Chris Keith.
All right. Thank you for that, Ryan. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good to see all of you again. Hopefully your travels to Eastern Idaho are going well. So at the last time we gave an update at the board meeting, it was in March, we did report the project was mostly intact. That has changed since then, unfortunately. There are a few key losses I'd like to emphasize this morning. One of those would be our technical design team lead for the dam raise effort. He is no longer there. And then also some other supporting staff that were working, some design staff that were working on the dam raise designs. We've also experienced some losses here regionally with some of our design staff that were working on the reservoir rim project mitigation work. And another big hit was our regional acquisitions and contracting staff. So we were not at that phase of the project, but they were definitely providing a lot of feedback, advice, and helping us make some good advancements towards the eventual construction contracting. So that's kind of highlighting what Ryan teed up for me, and I'll kind of work through what that means for the project. But before I do that, let me just reiterate, which we will continue to do and we have done in the past, that this is a top regional priority, not only for our offices here locally, regionally, but also at our Denver Technical Service. So across all the offices in Commissioner's office, this is a top priority. So what do those staffing losses mean for this project? There's 3 points I wanted to drive home today. One of those is that as much as possible, we are bringing in other reclamation, existing reclamation staff to support the work where there were holes from folks leaving. Some of them are already really familiar with the project and some of them are new. So there is sometimes a little bit of a learning curve there. We are working diligently to bring those new staff up to speed and really get them working towards this overall completion, and that, you know, get the team fully gelling together again and working towards completion for the design effort and the whole effort as a whole. And unfortunately, we've had to re-baseline the design schedule and push some things out, and I'll talk about that next. So where the schedule currently sits, I'll try to and definitely open this up for questions afterwards, but the mitigation work around the reservoir rim, it is a little bit ahead of the dam raise design schedule. So the reservoir rim mitigation designs, we expect 100% completion this fall. And then with the dam raise designs, we expect a 90% level completion this fall. So after we get the dam raise 90% designs this fall, that will kick off a very robust review period with folks here regionally and at our Denver Technical Service Center level. Where that will lead to is a dam raise design of 100% in spring of 2026. So I think the last time I reported, we were hoping for late this year or fall for 100% dam raise design. That is pushing out to spring of 2026. Or let me just kind of hit some big design milestones we've achieved since I last updated the board. For the reservoir rim project work, 8 of the 18 sites that we have to do design for, so that could be a boat dock, that could be a campground, an erosion control project along a roadway. We've got 8 of those at 100% completion. The drawings are signed, and that's ready to be wrapped up into the full overall package that we will get this fall. So that's good news there. For the dam raise, we recently just performed an updated risk neutrality and construction risk analysis meeting. This was something that we did back at 30% design level, and we were always planning on doing it, an update to that, a check back in after we got closer to a 90% level. And so that activity, which took about 3 or 4 days, did happen, and just helps to ensure that that our designs keep the facility risk neutral. So that's a really good thing to get achieved in the project schedule. And then some of the more things that we don't always put down on paper, but they're really important to drive home, is that both the design team here regionally and the design team in Denver continue to really coordinate very well and try to sync up the spec development and designs and coordination that we would need in the future, trying to really sync those up as best as possible. They continue to do that, and they have a really great working relationship. One example that was a big success was that they worked together to develop a water operations specification section that will inform how both contracts would handle water operations during construction. So that's a really good efficiency where they work together, and those will be very, very similar in the 2 specification packages. The last thing I want to really touch on here is our environmental compliance. I think the board is very aware that this is a major part of this project. It's something that is a great requirement, and we are working actively to get that going as much as possible. Plan is to resume that as soon as we can. We are really trying to work through some issues with the schedule and nail that down to the best of our ability. And we are committed to get that accomplished in the most timely manner. And with the new administration, we also pay attention to changing regulations and how that may or may not impact the EIS development. There were some new regulations that were shared just about 2 weeks ago. So we're trying to digest those as much as possible. Those are my updates, and I will hand it back over to Ryan to close us out.
Thanks, Chris, for those updates. And I will mention just on the last piece with environmental compliance that we did, as of last week, signed the BA to be sent over to NOAA for review and a biological opinion. So as Chris mentioned, we are reconvening the environmental compliance, and we will hopefully get that done as soon as possible, but monitoring the regulations and making sure that what we do is consistent with the new regulations that are coming out and the next steps that we have to be implemented. So in closing, as we've shared, there's been some staff losses that we are actively managing and ensuring that staff stay engaged and are up to speed, and make sure that we're doing what we can do to move this along as quickly as possible. With the schedule challenges, we're monitoring those and making sure that we again continue to move this and make good progress on it. And the design team, and like I mentioned, Chris and Brianna and everybody are working as hard as they can to keep this project on schedule as much as possible. So some delays, but with the number of losses that we've had, it could be a lot worse than so. And I just want to reiterate what Chris mentioned too. This is a top priority, not only for our area office, but for the region and for reclamation as a whole. So this project continues to be at the top of everybody's mind as it relates to getting this done as quickly as possible. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I open it up to questions. Any questions from all of you?
Board members, Joanne.
Yes, I just have one quick question on this fall when we see the 100% rim design and the 90% of the dam design. Would we also receive an updated cost estimate?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen, it probably won't be in fall, but I am targeting a late 25, maybe early 26 refresh to the cost estimate. Yes. So might be not quite in line with fall, but a little bit after. That is on the list to do, is to make sure that we update cost estimates to the best of our ability.
Okay, I like the term refresh. Board members, other questions? Al.
Mr. Chairman, Ryan, Keith, Chris, could you tell me what the process is for the environmental compliance? And you're going to do an SEIS, I assume, and that's going to come out. What's the schedule for that?
Ryan, or Mr. Chair, Ryan, maybe you can take that one and I can add on if needed.
Yeah, Chris, thanks. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, I can give you a high level overview of what that looks like. Like we've got, like I mentioned earlier, we have to work with NOAA and the Fish and Wildlife Service to get a biological opinion from each regarding endangered species. So that will be happening this calendar year. And then shortly after that, we've got to move forward with what the next step looks like regarding the EIS. And part of the regulation changes that the department has implemented impacts what that actually looks like. So my high level answer is we're going to do what the regulations tell us we have to do. And we're evaluating that right now with a supplemental information report to ensure that we fully understand what that looks like. And I apologize, I don't have a quick answer to say a supplemental EIS is the answer, because it may not be. We're actually looking at that as it relates to things, and the supplemental information or the supplemental EIS would be the most we would do, but it may be possible that we don't have to go that far. So I'm hopeful that we can maybe possibly move it quicker than that. So we're working right now on a draft supplemental information report. And once that is completed, we'll be able to determine what next steps are.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Yes.
So you said that BA went to NOAA. I assume you also sent the BA to Fish and Wildlife?
Due to staff changes, the BA has not been sent to Fish and Wildlife Services yet, but it will be hopefully by September be sent to Fish and Wildlife Service. And when I say staff changes, it's staff changes on their side. We're wanting to seek up when they get that report because, or our side of things, because they have 135 days to respond to that. And we want to ensure that we are able to maximize their time to review that. They actually, I think Fish and Wildlife, if I remember correctly, they've only got one person left that will be the one reviewing that document. And that person is on maternity leave right now. So timing is everything.
Okay. Any other questions? Mark, do you have anything?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. It takes me a minute to get my mute off, but I'm good.
Oh, okay. All right. I just don't want to leave you out. Okay. All right. I think, go ahead, Mark. Oh, he's done. Okay. Thanks for the update. I can't say that we're not ever so slightly disappointed. We seem to loosen a couple of rungs on this ladder we're climbing, and understand you have your limitations given staffing, but we need to carry on and push this as hard as we can.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. We definitely see that as well, and we'll continue to do our best to keep this moving.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm being told it's break time. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll be back online.
Thank you.
Okay.
My thought was, you saw my thought.
So they're
This thing is making noise.
but I guess we're paying for that.
This might be.
Well, but Idaho Power isn't going to.
And so they have that.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Cynthia. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You might want to mute the room.
Yeah, we will.
And they want a little bit out of priority.
Cynthia, can you hear us? Because we're going to do an experiment.
Yes, I can hear you.
So he's going to sit in the LC, and even though we have background noise, see what you hear.
Okay, sounds good.
Do my best to be out. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, can you hear me?
yes, actually, I can hear you pretty well. How about if you lean back a little bit and turn your head, Wes? Can't hear you very well at all. So if you face the mic, it's better.
Okay, how about now?
That's a little better. It's kind of light, but it's
I'm trying to mimic Al the best I can.
yep, and you're doing great. So yeah, I think facing forward, if they can do that to the extent they can, that would be better.
Okay, how about this, Cynthia?
Say that again, Wes.
How about this?
That's pretty, yeah, I think that's pretty good. And if we don't have the background noise, no problem.
Okay, are you going to want to run through your presentation yourself, or okay?
Thanks for your help, Cynthia.
Again, I'm not going to touch anything because.
Yes, thank you. Good luck with everything.
Okay, we'd like to reconvene. Call this meeting back to order as soon as we can get everybody in the chairs. Okay. All right. Next up, Twin Falls Connect Company has a presentation. And Jay, you're here to make that presentation on our behalf.
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present this project that we believe is really an important project for all of us. We believe it's an important project for the Twin Falls Canal Company, but not just us. We think it's important for the surface water community, for the groundwater community, for the state of Idaho, and certainly for the Idaho Water Resource Board. I would say that I handed out some handouts. They are really just the slides that are in this presentation. They'll allow you to move forward and flip back as you need as I go through this presentation. I'd also say that I have Jason Brown here with me. Jason Brown is the guy in our office who prepared the grant application. So if you have any questions, we need Jason's help in answering some of those questions. So I'll move on. Again, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to present. I'll start with my first slide, and I show this slide for a couple of reasons. The number one reason I like to show this slide is to point out that this is a canal liner that was installed in the Highline Canal on our project in the 1920s. That canal liner was removed in 2019. I would say it was 1920s concrete, you know, with lots of crazy aggregate, a lot of dirt in the concrete. It held up pretty well for 100 years. But after 100 years, it started to fail. It was put in there because this is a stretch of the Highline Canal where we start getting into a real gravelly area. And that gravel just allows that water in the canal to seep out of the canal and into Rock Creek. So again, we did that in the 20s, and I like to make that point because this is not an application or a project that we're coming to asking for money to do canal liners. Like this canal lining idea is something new to us. It's not new to us at all. In fact, you know, we first diverted water into the system in 1905. And from 1905 to the 1920s, that's all we did at the canal company in Twin Falls is line canals every day. As you can imagine, you know, we built a new canal system out in the arid desert and diverted water out of the Snake River. And you know, every day, if you look at the archived history of the company, every day there was a new washout somewhere. We were repairing canal banks, and in the off season when those canals were dry, they were lining those canals. We've done the same for the last 100 years. We've done many, many liner projects. We spent millions of hours and millions of dollars putting liners in these canals. It's just historically, we would go into a long stretch of canal and we would remove about 2 foot of material out of those canals. And then we would haul in good clay material and replace it with good clay material that would stop that water flow out of the bottom. And then we go on and you know, those projects worked pretty well for a while. And then a few years later, they would begin to fail again. We just needed a better product. We've used bentonite for liners over the years. We've even used polyacrylamide for liners over the years. Cinders, we have a cinder pit where we tried to line the cinders. We've been doing canal liners for 120 years at the Twin Falls Canal Company. So I talk a lot about liners because that's the bulk of what this project is. This is the 60 mil HDPE liner. This is just a picture of phase 1 of our liner project that we did in 2019. 2019, we lined that stretch where you saw that concrete liner. We removed that concrete liner. Again, it was failing. We removed that. We removed about 2 foot of material off the bottoms and the sides, and we laid this 60 mil HDPE liner in, and then we went back in with material to cover that liner. This liner exposed has about a 50-year lifespan. If we keep it covered, it will last virtually forever. It's a really, really good project, or really, really good product. And I want to put a hats off to the contractor that we've been working with. They are a very good contractor, very, very capable of doing this job. And we've got quite a bit of history. Again, we started working with him in 2019. Good outfit, good product, and we're excited to work further with them. So I'll go on to this next slide. This next slide shows phase 1 and phase 2 of this project. Phase 1 is that orange line. That's that project that we did in 2019. About 3/4 of a mile of the high line. That concrete liner was in that straight stretch up to the top of the screen. But again, that's very, very gravelly conditions out through there. And then in 2023, we went into phase 2 of the project, the purple line. You'll notice all those gravel pits that are surrounding that purple line. Again, this is just a very, very gravel-rich area. So again, that was 2019 and 2023. Uh-oh. Wow.
Losing time, Jay.
Okay, so this is what we did in 2021. This is the low-line siphon. You can see that is the low-line canal as it comes into the Rock Creek Canyon area. It's about a 250-foot deep canyon. 10-foot diameter pipe takes that flow of water down through the canyon, and then it emerges on the lower side of the canyon and continues on down through the project. You can see that that is Rock Creek Canyon there. That's parallel to this stretch of the low-line canal there. We lined about 1,750 feet of the low-line canal in 2021. And again, because it is so close to the canal there, we were losing a lot of water into the canal. So you can see that is an excavator down there that is repairing a sinkhole that appeared in that very narrow bank. Again, that's about a 250-foot drop there to the bottom of the canal. And there was just a lot of water emerging in the bottom of the canyon there as it leaked down the canal. It's been doing it for years and years. But when we started getting the sinkholes there and trying to repair those sinkholes in the middle of the irrigation season, we realized that if we ever failed to catch one of those sinkholes and it washed the canal away there, it was washing down to a 250-foot level. We were going to be down most of the rest of the season just trying to repair that. We had to do something with it. So I point that out because the use for this liner with the Twin Falls Canal Company hasn't been only to save water. There are some safety concerns when we have canals like this. So we appreciate the safety concerns, but nonetheless, there was absolutely water loss going on there that is no longer going on there. Again, about 1,750 foot of that. I bring this up because you'll notice those dates. It's 2019, 2021, 2023. Those are the years that we did those liner projects. Every other year, we've been trying to do a big liner project. It's become a real problem in the company. Those crews that we employ have got other responsibilities that they're supposed to be taking care of. We have over 10,000 concrete structures on our project. If I replace 100 structures a year, I can overturn my concrete inventory once every 100 years. We have 1,000 miles of main canals to maintain, or small canals, 100 miles of main canals to maintain. That is the purpose of those crews. That is what they are to be doing. So it's becoming not just a budgetary issue financially, but we've got to budget our time as well. These guys have got other responsibilities that we've got to be taking care of. That's why we only do one of these every other year. This last year, in 2024, we put quite a little bit of liner in last year, last off season. This is the mainline canal at Stastny's. Stastny is one of the water users in the area. And you can see that's a pretty good stretch of a really, really wide canal. This canal up there is about 120 feet wide. And you can see that spoil on the upper side of the canal. We had a seep there that we had worked on for 2 or 3 years. And you can see the scarring in the land there. The seep wasn't new. This water's been leaking out of that canal for years. Up to the top right of the corner, about a half a mile away, is the Snake River Canyon. Again, our concern is that there's a safety concern there, but no doubt we are losing water there and have been losing water there for years. So we got that line, or that piece of canal lined in 2024. This is another one, lateral 26. This is just about a mile and a half from Twin Falls, Snake River Canyon, Twin Falls. This is an area in a small lateral, and we had a huge sinkhole there about 15 years ago. I mean, it was a huge sinkhole. We lost the whole canal in there. It just completely dried up from that point on down. Crews stuffed 11 one-ton straw bales into that hole, trying to fill the void. Put concrete in on the top of those straw bales, and then came in with good clay materials and bridged that gap to get us through that season. In the off season, we went in and put a culvert over that area. We piped across that area to further ensure that even if that sinkhole opened up again, we could convey water through there throughout the season. This last year, the water worked its way around that culvert, found the sinkhole again, and we lost lateral 26 again. So this last year, we went into lateral 26 and we lined that stretch. Again, we have a situation where I've got water users downstream who need their water. I've got to get that water to them. I can't continue to lose it down the hole. But furthermore, we are losing water in lateral 26. So we no longer are. Lateral 38, we also did lateral 38 last year. This is a short stretch of lateral 38. It's right in the center of Twin Falls. You can see all those houses that are adjacent to lateral 38. Well, right under that yellow line, the city many years ago installed a sewer line. And it is the sewer line that services that row of houses. The water in the canal found its way to that sewer line and then found its way to all of those private lines that go into those homes. And so we had most of those basements full of water from lateral 38. We can't move the sewer line, we can't move the canal. So what we did, that is a church right there to the right. We worked with that church, and they allowed us to shift that canal slightly over to the right, and then we lined that stretch. So I talk about all this just to tell you, this is really a good product. We have some experience with it, and we have continued to use this product to try to conserve our water, and try to sustain our needs throughout the season. So here's the project. We call this the Rainbow Stretch, or the Rainbow Project. Some prefer us to use the term tie-dye stretch instead of rainbow. But this is the Highline Canal. And what I want to point out is there on the bottom of the screen, just below that yellow thumbtack, that is Rock Creek. That is Rock Creek Canyon coming out of the South Hills. And then it makes a left-hand turn, and it parallels this whole stretch of Highline Canal. Again, this is a Highline Canal. The average width of this Highline Canal is about 75 feet wide, anywhere from 8 to 12 feet deep. It's a very, very large canal, and it's all built on gravel. There's gravel under that entire stretch. So we have for years worked on that stretch of canal. This is one of the areas where we have removed about a mile of canal bottom and sides historically and replaced it with good clay material. It worked pretty good, but it didn't last forever. We continue to have issues in that stretch, and this is the stretch that we want to line. You'll see the orange stretch on the right side. That is the phase 1 that we talked about earlier, and the purple stretch being phase 2. And then there are 5 more stretches that we want to line. Again, it all parallels Rock Creek. Rock Creek is not very far away. This water seeps out through the gravels at the bottom of the canal and finds its way to Rock Creek. I wanted to talk about those individual stretches just a little bit. This is the Stafford's Bend stretch. Just a little under a mile is the stretch. And I want you to notice as we look through these slides, I want you to look at the soil conditions adjacent to the canal. And you can see, the farm product is just not real good there. You can see the evidence of the water that seeps through that canal. We did line a short stretch at Stafford's Bend last year because we have a seep that has been recurring and getting worse and worse and worse every year. We have tried to stop it. We do what we call a core job, where we go up there with an excavator and we dig a very, very deep trench. And we intercept the water that's moving through the bank, and we pack a clay material into that trench in order to stop the flow of water through the bank. Those excavators, the last 2 times we poured, those operators said that they felt they were working on a bowl of jelly, that there was so much water in that bank. Again, the Rock Creek Canyon is about 3/4 of a mile to the up into the top right corner. A very, very high bank. If we ever lose that bank, it's going to be a bad day. We historically in the 80s had a near canal break down in the bottom end of that stretch. We had a leak through there, and one of our ditch cutters got it in time for us to get out there and get it stopped before it broke the canal. But again, there's some safety issues there, but moreover, it's very, very obvious. You can see from the scars on the earth there, we are losing water in that stretch. That's what we're trying to avoid. I'll go from there to the Williams Siphon stretch. It's 5,400 feet, a little over a mile. This is directly upstream of the Stafford's Bend stretch. And again, this is just an area, and you can see the scarring of those pivots there. There is water moving out of those canals and through the ground en route to Rock Creek. Again, Rock Creek is just about a half a mile or less than a half a mile to the right of this canal. Very, very high canal. It's perched up significantly higher than the ground adjacent to it. In the 90s, we had a huge canal break right in the center of that red line. And there was what we call the Williams Siphon. The Williams Siphon was a pipe that pumped water out of Rock Creek and up onto the farm ground, and that big green pivot that you see there. That pipe was buried under the canal, and the water seeped through the gravel, found that pipe, and then washed the pipe out, washing the canal back out as well. So that pipe now sits over the top of the canal. We worked to bridge the canal and put that pipe over the top of the canal, but that water continues to leak through those gravels in that area. Just upstream of that, we have what we call the Cottonwood Canyon stretch. It's right at 2 miles, 10,000 feet. And I would point out, again, that is a canyon right there, right adjacent to that green line. And at the bottom of that canyon, you can stand on a canal bank, very, very similar to that photo that I showed you of the low-lying canal earlier, where there's just a huge drop there, a very, very narrow bank, and you can watch the water emerging at the bottom of that bank. That water is just leaking out of the bottom of this canal. We've been up there multiple times and done core jobs to try to improve the situation, and we've made it for 120 years, but it's a scary situation, and we've been losing water in this stretch of canal for 120 years. I would say that this is also what we call the rock cut area. Most of that that's right adjacent to the canyon was blasted into rock. So we have completely vertical sides on the walls of that canal. We can't line a vertical sided canal. So part of this request involves blasting and allowing us to shift that canal away from that canyon slightly and get that nice 2-to-1 slope that we have to have on the canal in order to put the line in it. Directly upstream of that is what we call the Kinsey stretch. The Kinsey stretch is about a 3-mile long stretch. We lose a lot of water in the Kinsey stretch. Again, I'd ask you to look at the scarring, look at the cropping patterns in that ground that's right adjacent to the canal. You can see that there is just water seeping through that canal throughout this entire stretch. I'd also point out those gravel pits. Directly to the south of the canal, there are gravel pits everywhere. every piece of ground out there is under contract with a gravel pit in this area. One of them is about exhausted. The supply of gravel in it is nearly exhausted. And so they're going to reclaim that pit and they're going to open up the other side. And that is that half of the pivot that you see there. That is permitted for gravel use. So again, just to further assert that the entire stretch of canal is built on gravel. And again, Rock Creek is about half a mile too deep north of there. Then the last stretch, this is what we call a gravel pit stretch. You can see there on the right-hand side of the screen, those are all gravel pits through there. And that is gravel throughout that area. Again, this is just an alluvial fan come from Rock Creek spilling out of the South Hills, and it's just deposited gravel in this area for thousands of years. So all these canals that were built 120 years ago were built right on gravel. They continue to leak. Again, you can see the cropping, you can see the scars in the earth. Incidentally, it starts right at the end of where phase 2 ended, that orange line that we talked about earlier, or I guess it was the purple line, it was phase 2. So that is just a quick overview of the 5 stretches we're talking about. Overall, it looks like that. It's 9 1/4 miles of canal that we need to get lined. 9 1/4 miles that sits right on top of gravel. In many cases, with gravel pits right adjacent to the canal. You can imagine the folks that live out in that area have grown accustomed to that water seeping out of the canals. They've grown accustomed to using it. There are issues associated with this. Our goal as we do this project is to avoid picking winners and losers. If we can figure out ways to help these folks with the water that they're no doubt going to lose, that they've grown accustomed to using, that is what we want to do. As much as possible. This is that area that I talked about, and you'll recognize that half a pivot that I told you that was going to turn into gravel pit soon. That blue square that you see there, that is the gravel pit that is exhausted. That is the gravel pit that they have to reclaim. We're working with the owners of that property to try to develop a recharge basin in that area where I can divert water out of the Highline Canal and into that basin to help feed some of that water that these folks have lost. Now, are we going to feed that year round? Of course not. We're not going to do that. We hope to make it available to the Water Resource Board, as we have a long history of working with the Water Resource Board on recharge. And if and when that water is available, we will divert Water Resource Board water into that basin. There are also situations, particularly in the spring and in the fall, when the canal is full and all of a sudden we get a rain event. It takes about 3 days to get water from the top of our system to the bottom of our system. This facility sits about halfway in the middle of our system. So when we get one of those rain events, I've got the canal full of water and I can't run it back uphill and put it back in the reservoir, back in the river. So we've got to shut that water off. But at least I can save a day and a half of that water in this basin, and it can percolate down into the ground and help satisfy some of the concerns of the local neighborhood there. Again, we don't want to create winners and losers. Everywhere we can, we want to try to create winners with this project. On the far west end of our system, we have Lateral 1. Lateral 1 has been a huge problem child for us forever. That is Salmon Falls Creek that runs parallel to that yellow line. You'll see it there to the left. Again, about a third of a mile from this canal is Salmon Falls Creek, and it parallels that canal all the way down there. Lateral 1 has sinkholes in it every year. There are years that we have repaired 15, 16 different sinkholes in Lateral 1. These sinkholes generally appear either right after you turn the water into the canal system, and that soil at the bottom of the canals gets heavy enough with the water in it that it drops into the void that was underneath the canal. Or it happens right at the end of the season when we shut the water off. And all of a sudden, the water that was in that void that was helping support the bottom of the canal drains its way out, and then that heavy soil falls out. Again, This happens every year, where we have multiple sinkholes in lateral one. And to think that it's not happening during the irrigation season would be naive. We're losing a lot of water every year through lateral one. It's been a problem. We've lined several stretches of it as well with cinders, with good clay material. Nonetheless, obviously the rock structures underneath those soils have got a lot of cracks and fissures in them that feed right straight to Salmon Falls Creek. Our hopes are to line a bunch of lateral one, and we also have some HDPE pipe in the application to pipe part of it. Some of it, this is a smaller canal. This is not a 75-foot wide canal. This is a 10-foot wide canal, but it's a huge water loss for us. I would say right at the head of lateral one, actually at the very tail end of the Highline Canal is where you will find lateral one. Lateral one spills into Deep Creek there, and we divert water into 10 laterals off of Deep Creek. Laterals 1 through lateral 10. This is lateral 1, it's the first one. And so years ago, we built the Kenyon Pond Reservoir. The Kenyon Pond Reservoir, again, it's about 3 days travel time to get water from the top of the system down to the bottom of the system, down to this location. And when we had a water user down there, and his last name was Brown. And so we referred to them for years as brownouts. When we have those events in the middle of July and August, when all of a sudden there's not enough water to get to the end of the season, we call that a brownout. And when those events happened, it took us 3 days to get that water from the top of the system back down to the bottom of the system and restore those focused water. So we built the Kenyon Pond. The Kenyon Pond holds almost exactly 3 days worth of water. So when we have those brownouts now, if we use those rain events in the spring and throughout the summer to fill the reservoir, then when we have a brownout, we can go ahead and sustain those needs while we bring more water in. As we put this liner in, as we put this HDPE pipe in lateral one, we are going to need material to cover the liner. We're going to need material to bed the pipe. And the Kenyon Pond was largely a good gravel supply. So we're hopeful that we can harvest more material out of Kenyon Pond, further expanding its capacity and also helping us cover the liner and bed the pipe. The next thing in the last part of this application is what we call our return flow network. This is 28 different locations along the Twin Falls Canal Company system where the Twin Falls Canal Company facilities spill into the Snake River. These 28 locations were identified 25, 30 years ago. They represent about 90% of all the water that spills off of the system and into the Snake River. We have monitored these things for 20, 25 years, ever since we've developed the list. And we use those as a daily management tool. Typically, if we're spilling, the total of all of these 28 sites is spilling, let's say 120, 130 CFS, we know that we're pretty loose. We know that we've got to get on ditch riders. We've got to get on water mashers. We want to say, hey, 120 CFS is too much water to be spilling. If we're right at 100 CFS, we know that's about as tight as we can get. That's pretty tight. That's 100 CFS off of a diversion of 3,650 CFS. That's less than 3% spill. And we use that to gauge how we're doing throughout the season. Historically, we monitor these every 2 weeks. Then for several years, we monitor them every week. The last couple of years, we monitor these daily. We watch these spills on a daily basis. But to be honest, all of those readings that we get are between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning. The traders and water mashers will go out and measure that water between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll plug it into the spreadsheet and we'll find out what the total is. We don't know what they're doing at midnight. We don't know what they're doing at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We think it would be hugely helpful. We've talked a lot about pump back systems. We've talked a lot about total canal control. What we're missing to actually implement any of those is the data. We need to know what's going on a 24-hour basis. I need every 15-minute readings on each of these 28 sites. So part of our request is $1.8 million to put new structures in and to automate all of those 28 sites so that we can get that data. I think it'll go a long, long way to identifying those areas where we can implement some total canal control. If there's areas out there where a pump-back system makes any sense, this data will help show that. Furthermore, it will help the department as they look at the south side return flow network or the south side returns in more accurately identifying what the south side returns are relative to the Swan Falls agreement. So we are, again, really, really hopeful with this grant application. We think it benefits everyone. We believe it benefits not only the Twin Falls Canal Company, the Surface Water Coalition, the groundwater community, but the state of Idaho, and certainly the Water Resource Board. I believe that's my last slide. I took a lot of notes for this and I didn't look at them once, so whatever I've forgotten, let me fill in the blanks.
Okay, board members, any questions on this proposal? Dean.
Mr. Chairman, Jay, first off, good job on your presentation, and I think this is a good project. How much water do you figure you will save on an annual basis from these linings?
So it's a little hard to identify, right? I mean, we don't know how much exactly they're leaking. I can tell you that when we first started this, we put a Doppler boat in the canal at the top end of each stretch and at the bottom end. And we come up with a number of 25 CFS per mile in those first two stretches. Is that accurate, or is that within the margin of error of a 1,400 CFS canal, right? The only thing we know is we know we're losing water. We know from the neighborhood out there adjacent to phase 1 and phase 2 that the liner does work. Water no longer leaks there, and not everyone is super happy about that. But it does stop the water. What we've identified is we think that we are probably losing anywhere from 5 CFS to 25 CFS per mile. And that range is about, I believe, 19,000 acre feet of water to about 68,000 acre feet of water annually. Are there places out there that leak more than 25 CFS a mile? I believe there are. But does that mean that that whole stretch leaks 25 CFS a mile? Of course not.
Thank you.
Okay. Brian. Mr. Chairman, JJ, so this is obviously several years. Are you thinking seems like 5 to 7 years you were?
Yeah, I think we put, and Jason can help me, but I think we put, I believe, 8 years in the application. Frankly, the contractor believes that he can blow the canal liner out quicker than that. I hope he's right. You know, there are some weather conditions out there. You know, many winters we only get about 30 to 45 days where we can work out in that area. Another part of the reason for the 8 years is that return flow network. You know, it spans the whole distance of the system. There are 28 structures and 28 automated sites that need to be put in. We hope to use local contractors to put those structures in. We're working right now with Campbell Scientific for the automation component of that. So yeah, we didn't want to be too presumptive to say that we're going to have this knocked out in 3 years. It's a big project. There's a lot of work to be done. And so I believe 8 years is what we put in the application.
Right. One other point, Jay, and maybe you were going to mention it. I think it's important that people know that this is not incidental recharge to the ESPA, but this has an impact on the ESPA because Twin Falls is the biggest natural flow user out of the ESPA. But this aquifer under the Twin Falls Tract actually is a separate Southside aquifer, so it affects the Swan Falls agreement, but it does not. This incidental recharge is not lost to the ESPA. It's never tributary to the ESPA.
Agreed. And you know, the struggle that exists between the groundwater community and the surface water community is really rooted in the health, the overall health of the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer and the overall health of the Blackfoot to Minidoka reach gains. Does this have a direct effect on that? No. Those projects that can be identified and implemented that can continue to help the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer and the Blackfoot to Minidoka reach gains absolutely have to be identified, funded, implemented. It's still all a part of the situation. But if this can help, we at the Twin Falls Canal Company are kind of unique. We are the guys that are hugely dependent on that natural flow component of the river. That being said, we are the tail that wags the dog in this situation. So anything that can help the Twin Falls Canal Company get from one end of the season to the other end of the season potentially helps us all. If nothing else, it lowers the volume on the struggle while we identify, fund, and implement projects up there that hit the core, that hit that Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer, that hit that Blackfoot and Minidoka Reach Game.
Pat?
Mr. Chairman, Jay, the drain structure, the drain monitoring, what kind of structuring is involved in that? Do you have to build a rated section, or how do you do it?
No, I mean, that return flow network is a real mix, right? I mean, there's some of those return flows that when we measure them, they have 3 CFS spilling. There's some of them that will have 14 CFS spilling into the river. Some of them are up on flat land and some of them are in canyons. So we're envisioning that some of the structures will be relatively small weir structures, probably broad-crested weirs. If and where we can put a broad-crested weir, and the elevation required by the broad-crested weir doesn't adversely affect the floodwater basin that's associated with all these drains. So that's what we're looking at, is probably concrete weir structures. Some of them will be relatively small, some of them will be large. The last few years, certainly not so much this year, but in 2024, there was excess water available in Milner. And the Water Resource Board had asked us to try to divert some water into the canal system in an effort to recharge as much as we can, rather than just let it go by. But they had one requirement: anything you spill back to the river, you can't count for recharge. Naturally, right? And that's part of our struggle. We have a few of these locations, and there are a couple of other ones that we want to do, but we don't have any measurement. And so we want to make sure that we build measurement structures everywhere we can, so that if and when that opportunity presents itself, we can bring that water in and we can measure everything we spill back to the river, and we can assist the Water Resource Board in those years when there's opportunity to do so.
Okay. Other questions, board members? Mark, did you have anything?
I'm good. No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Jay. We'll be discussing this further tomorrow.
Thank you again.
Okay. All right, Ryrie, rule curve study update.
We've got Lyle Swank here to give us an update on what's going on with Ryrie.
Welcome, Lyle. This is a project you just can't quite wear out, is it?
I'm trying to. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Jeff referred to it. I've been working on this one for a while. Haven't reached the finish line yet, but we'll show you where we're at least. So it's a picture of Ryrie Reservoir. One of the problems we've had is continual turnover from Corps of Engineers, Bureau of Reclamation, project managers. Both those positions turned over again this past quarter. Right now, we've got Karen Kelly from the Corps of Engineers in the Walla office, and she has some familiarity with this project because she was working on it when another project manager was on maternity leave and then temporary assignment to a different place. And then, of course, Brian Stevens is very familiar with the operation of the reservoir, and he's now the project manager for the Olmstead Bureau of Reclamation. So I'm not sure how many times the Corps of Engineer project manager has turned over. I think if you count people have been there more than one time as project manager, as it passed off from different people. I think I count 7 project managers in about that many years. There's been work on this. But anyway, we do have people that have some familiarity and they're not starting from ground zero right now. Okay. So anyway, I'm here representing Mitigation Inc. And Mitigation Inc. had to have an irrigation district to work or some sort of public entity for the Corps of Engineers to contract with. Because the Corps wanted to have people that could do assessments if they did some work and made sure they were going to still get paid. The other partner with this is the Bureau of Reclamation. The Bureau of Reclamation's main role in this is trying to do dam safety work. If you keep additional storage water held over in the reservoir, does that affect the safety of dams? And the conclusion was basically you've got to be able to operate the gates of the drier reservoir. And to do that, you've got to have either de-icing or bubbler gauge or something to be able to operate the gates during that winter time period. And that seemed reasonable to us. So, the Corps of Engineers initially had a much shorter time period, more like around 5 years. The phase 3 portion was what changed the most. I'll briefly explain the phases we've been at. Phase 1 was kind of the hydrologic input, rain, precipitation, frozen ground conditions, all the things that go into the runoff that comes into the reservoir. And part of that was done by the Corps of Engineers back in New Hampshire, where they've got a cold regions laboratory that does that type of study. Phase 2 that we've been in more recently is routing some of that water and runoff through the reservoir, surveying other things that go into what would be the concerns you'd have if you routed that water on through the reservoir or didn't have enough flood storage space. Phase 3 is what we hope to get to, and that's to get to a water control manual revision, and so you have at least a permanent change in that part of the water supply. So I've been checking off the different steps as we've gone through this. LiDAR study, field surveys done most of 1 year, 2022, inventory for economic data, and for them that means what is the flood damage if you had a flood or where the structures below that, HH data, hydrologic management system. So that data collection, all that's done in order to get the model set up. And the model set up then goes from one model into another, and the way the Corps of Engineers did that. So they've got water going into the hydrologic model, from that into the reservoir simulation, from that into the water analysis tool, and Monte Carlo analysis of hydrologic conditions, and the river analysis system. Right now, they're at the flood damage analysis portion of the model, and they're they told us it'll be complete by the end of July, but I talked to them, and it's not done yet, but they're still close to that time period. Okay, so this is part of what that modeling involves. Initially, we're asking for 20 to 20,000 acre feet of additional storage carried over in the reservoir. And so what they studied was 0, 20,000, and 28,000 acre feet. Third alternative, after you got through part of that modeling, was the Corps of Engineers said we can only get to 6,000 acre feet carry over, plus another 7,500 acre feet if you have snow and ice removal contracts on the floodway channel. So what we're looking at now is, it's not on this particular slide, it's 13,500 acre feet of changes to the reservoir, both in storage carryover plus storage that can accumulate during the winter before they get up to that limitation. 13,500 acre feet, 15% of 90,000 acre feet, 15% is the maximum the Corps can change based on their policy without getting congressional reauthorization of the reservoir. So I think that's where we're at right now. The operations, your reclamation study said you could hold 20,000 feet of additional water without causing a dam safety concern. The other part of this, of course, we're trying to get to, well, we presented this to the mitigation board, which is the people that did part of phase 1. The water board has paid for most of phase 2. And we're trying to get to phase 3 of the manual revision. Along with the environmental assessment, we did an initial environmental assessment of Bureau of Reclamation did initially, and they came up with a FONSI determination, finding no significant impact. And so now they're getting to the same stage. We're going to have to use a lot of that information, but the Corps is going to do a separate environmental assessment as we get into an exact number that we're looking at. Okay, here's our more recent hurdle that we've come up against. The Decker Farms versus the United States. This is really a Decker Farms and others against the EP, against the Corps of Engineers. This actually was a case that has gone through the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, but it's actually on the Missouri River basin. Missouri River for decades, the goal was to reduce flooding, increase navigation, and shipping of barges on the Missouri. So at times the Missouri River is 13 miles wide in one place. So it's wide and shallow, not the best for navigation. You want to have it deeper and less flooding. So the reservoirs built were designed to do that. Well, after about 20 years of doing that with the reservoirs now, they had the Fish and Wildlife Service did a biological opinion analysis of what's happening with the fish and wildlife related to the Missouri River. And the conclusion was that it wasn't functioning with the Missouri River, it wasn't functioning like it should, according to the Fish and Wildlife Study. So the Corps of Engineers have had flood control and navigation as their first priority. Now decide, well, we've got to have flood control, navigation, and fish and wildlife on equal footing. So when they did that, after a couple of years of drought years, they were trying to reconnect some of the braided river system and cause flooding in some of these other places. So that's what this system, or this case is all about. And the result of this is they decided, the courts decided that it was reasonable for people to build in what you call that floodplain And then they were damaged when they reconnected some of those graded river channels. So the Corps is using this as one of the reasons why they can't change the flood risk for Ryder Reservoir. And I think there's quite a few differences, but that's one of the problems we've got right now is the Corps saying, look, we can't reduce the flood risk because of the Decker Farms decision. So in order to get to phase 3, here was the initial estimate of $23,000 and a quarter a year. I think this is what you call the Corps nest on this one. They're saying right now to get to phase 3 would be $355,000, and it's a 3-year process if you go through this reallocation study. Reallocation study is not what we're trying to do right now, but if you took the snow and ice information they developed in phase 1 and applied it to the flood risk, I think you'd have to incorporate the soil moisture and the frozen ground conditions into their study. But we're not trying to get through that. We're trying to get through it much quicker. So the last lap we're trying to do right now, this is the path forward. We're trying to get through the different steps that we've got. Core loads are acronyms, so ATR review is just the agency technical review. Sponsor of Bureau of Reclamation will get a chance to review the Corps' work pretty soon, in August. Public review. Once they get all the study done, we're looking at trying to get public input. Of course, so that's a step we've got to get to that's pretty important in order to keep this online. And then the decision package, and then it has to go clear up to the commander of the Corps of Engineers, and before it can be adopted and changed as water main review. But anyway, that's basically my presentation. You know, our reservoir, I think, has a lot of potential to keep additional storage. It's hard to fill reservoir, and most years has a fairly junior storage right. So keeping storage water up there helps it to fill. You can then release water from a reservoir when you need it. Downstream, there's been additional recharge basins being constructed. So it's a good location. And you can also use it, use a reservoir to carry water from a good water year into a drought year, or change the timing of the water. So that's where we're at. We are still trying to get this done by close to the end of this year or the next year. But with the Corps' turnover of personnel, one of the more recent times they said, well, why we don't want this deadline to slip? And they said, well, we've only got one economist, and we're trying to do several different projects. So this was from the local office. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions on the rule curve study?
Mr. Chairman.
Al and then Brian.
So, while I'm not sure I followed the explanation about the Idaho Farms case, does that mean, are you saying that the Corps is saying that the case is going to stymie their ability to make any changes at all? And if so, why are we continuing to getting a study if we can't do anything after we get the study?
Yeah, so I think that's partially what I got out of it, is the Corps is saying we can only do so much because of the Decker Farms. They're okay with going with the 6,000 feet, plus with the snow and ice removal in the floodway, another 7,500, 13,500 combined. They're okay with going that far.
Okay.
Within the 15% policy limitation they've got, that's as far as they think they can go without congressional reauthorization. And so it's not the 20 to 28,000 that I thought the hydrology supported, because right now they're saying that this is and preventing flooding up to like a 500-year flood event. And that seems, look at 500 flood event, that's a pretty extreme event. Priory and it's part of the watershed will not be the part of the problem if you have that kind of a huge flood. But they're saying policy for the Corps, 50% revision on the flood goal curve is the maximum they can get to. They are using Idaho farms as a reason to say this is why we can't increase the flood risk downstream, is because when we did that, in order to reconnect it as part of that decision, it did cause additional flood damage, and they were able to say the Corps is responsible for some of the damages to structures within that. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman Lyle, I think that clarified mine. I've had a hard time hearing a couple times, and so are they paring us down to just 6,000 new acre feet, or are we still striving for 22?
So 13,500 acre feet is what we're trying to go for now to get that as a firm number and change to the water operations manual. 20 to 28,000 acre feet that I initially asked for based on hydrology, but that was based on a 100-year flood or 200-year flood event. You could get up to that much and still have that much protection. But right now we're trying to get to a firm number of 13,500 from two different, from the revision to the carryover, which holds more water in the reservoir late in the fall, and then the additional ice and snow removal allows 7,500 acre feet during the winter months, showing that it can move water down the flood channel if that's the case there. So 13,500 is what we're trying to do to get to anything like that 20 to 28,000. I think you've got to get through congressional reauthorization, and we've been told by some people that's a pretty heavy lift. When I agree that the Corps would necessarily be out in front trying to change that. I did ask a couple of people from the Corps, well, what happens if the congressional people take the lead and say, we want to do this change? Will you stand in the way or not? And the Corps staff were unwilling to say, you know, they don't want, they have a lot of inertia, I guess, is one way to describe them, because they don't have, don't really want to make a lot of changes that causes them to have to defend their positions.
Okay, any other questions? You do have a little shortfall here in your.
Yes.
Okay.
You're talking about the financial shortfall?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this was a Corps estimate. I don't know, they have told us a standard flood goal curve change is around $2 million, 3 to 4 years. That's not what we're going for right now. We're trying to just get the existing 13,500. That was a decision the mitigation board made to try to get that firmly input into the operations manual. And so, yeah, that was a, we call that a miss on the Corps' budgeting side. But of course, they were trying to budget that several years in advance. But I think when they thought they'd get to this stage, they'd have something that just says implement this. And there's more environmental things going on than what was assumed under this initial change to the manual.
So what's the timeline that Mitigation Inc. has to provide this funding to the Corps to complete the study?
Yeah, if we try to get to this time frame, we're trying to get through the public review this fall, and as far as trying to get to the budget shortfall, that is putting Mitigation Inc. above that budget amount to get to this stage. So they're trying to get to that this year, really.
So you would have to provide payment to the Corps fairly soon.
I think so. I think it's coming up very soon. I haven't been as involved with that as Alan Kelch has. He's more on the financial side of this thing. But yeah, it would be during, I'll say this calendar year, maybe not this one.
Okay. Right. Okay, thanks for the update, Lyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up we have ESPA recharge infrastructure update. And Matt Anders, I believe?
Yes. Thank you. You ready? All right.
You bet, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Matt Anders. I'm here to give you an update on the recharge program. So let's first start with all the projects that the board has done since the inception of the program in 2014. The board's approved 34 projects in the Upper Valley and 29 projects in the Lower Valley. The figure on the right there shows where these projects are. Each dot is one of the projects. In terms of capacity, the board has developed 300 CFS of recharge capacity in the Upper Valley and 2,000 in the Lower Valley. Over the life of the program, the board has invested over $46 million in recharge on the ESPA, and they've recharged a total of 2.5 million acre feet for an average of 251,000 acre feet. The cost per acre foot is $18 an acre foot over the life of the program. Now let's shift to the current projects that the board has going on the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. These are projects approved between 2022 and 2024. There's 13 of these projects for a total budget of just over $25 million. The figure on the right, the orange dots there are the locations of the projects on the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. There are 11 of the projects, 11 of the 13 are in the Upper Valley for a total of $21 million. And 2 of the projects are in the Lower Valley for $3.6 million. I'm not going to go through the individual projects today, but in your board materials, there's a table in there that goes through these projects by name, how much capital is involved, capacity, things like that. So if you're interested in a specific project, you can use that as a reference to get more information. And now let's shift to the new projects. Over the last few months, the board has received 5 proposals for recharge projects on the Eastern Snake Plain. All 5 of these have been in the Upper Valley. Here on this map, it shows where these projects are on the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. This table is in your board materials, but it summarizes the 5 projects, so you can see them all at once. The first column there is the name of the project. The second one is the capital cost. Third one is the estimated cost per acre foot. And then there's some metrics there about what happens to the water once it gets in the aquifer. We presented these 5 projects and discussed them at the Aquifer Stabilization Committee meeting on July 11th. The committee recommended 2 of these to the board for funding. The Aberdeen Springfield Canal Company Hilton Well Project and the Burgess Canal Company Recharge Complex. So tomorrow we will be proposing resolutions for funding for both of those 2 projects. There were three projects that were presented in that meeting that were tabled. One of them was the Harrison Canal pilot project, and then 2 by the Progressive Irrigation District, the Big Basin and the South Fork 2 project. Since that meeting, we've received an updated proposal from Progressive Irrigation District on the Big Basin project. What was voted on, or in that meeting, the aquifer stabilization meeting, was a cost of $11.5 million. The new proposal is for about $7.5 million, and some changes in the depth of the basin. At this point, from a staff point of view, we're waiting guidance from either the Aquifer Stabilization Committee or the board to do any additional work on these. We've taken them as far as we can at this point. So I put this table in just to, in case you're interested in comparing what was proposed, the 5 projects, the cost per acre foot, with some existing projects. So the third column here is the cost per acre foot to recharge water over a 20-year time period. So this is an estimate. You can compare this column to the same column in the previous table. What I've also put on here is the actual cost of recharge from 2015 to 2024, and that's the 6th column. Fortunately, in the Upper Valley, we only have one site that has enough recharge in that time frame to get a good calculation. But in the Lower Valley, many of those sites have been used for several years, so the final column here on the far right is again the actual cost per acre foot from 2014 to 2025. So it compares well with, in most cases, with the third column, which is the 20-year estimate that we've made. And the final thing I'd like to talk about is a new proposal that we received last week from Northside Canal Company. It's for a recharge site feasibility study. The location of this project is on the lower left, the figure on the lower left, that green dot down in the lower left there. That's the location in the eastern state plain. On the right, the figure there is zoomed into the project location. To orient yourself, Wilson Lake is in the lower right corner there. So these blue areas here are areas that they'll look at in the feasibility study to get an idea if they're viable candidates for recharge projects. There is in your board materials the letter from Northside Canal Company and a project summary of what they're going to do. Currently, they're requesting $50,000 for this recharge study. My understanding is we can fund these out of the investigations funds, so we're not planning to bring this as a resolution to the board. And with that, if there's any questions.
Questions, board members? Dean.
Mr. Chairman, so these north side parcels, are they all on BLM?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stevenson, I don't think they're on BLM, but some of the canals that would need to feed the water to these from the main canal or from Wilson Lake does cut across the BLM. So I think the BLM would be involved in some of these.
Okay.
Okay, we're working on a legislative fix. Make BLM happy. Where's Wilson Canyon in relation to these 3 areas? Is it further down the canal, or do you know where the Wilson Canyon recharge site is?
Wes, could you provide that?
Yes, if you look at the middle blue circle, so if you go down just a little bit, yeah, it's basically right. So go to your left. Just right below the blue circle, the middle one.
Oh, the middle. Okay, right below. So it would be
right there. No.
On the bottom side of what I think. Yeah, right in there.
Yeah, it's right in there. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time controlling that. That's hard. Man, that was rough. But yes, it's just right in there.
Okay.
Is it right here? Is this Wilson Canyon right there?
A little further to the left.
As my eyes get older, I gotta get a lot closer to things.
I think that's.
I think you're. I think it's this area right here.
Okay.
Here, yeah. Yep. It's just right here.
Okay. All right. Brian.
Mr. Chairman, Matt, so just looking at timetables, we found the Upper Valley recharge basins to be pretty expensive. Hoping for cheaper alternatives. Is there time by this fall to get some new proposals in? Do you think there will be, or?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, I haven't heard of any proposals, but we certainly have the staff time to do our analysis that we normally do on these yet this fall.
Okay. Anything else? I think we're good. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Okay, Bingham Groundwater District update.
Alan Jackson, I believe will give.
Alan, welcome.
Chairman, Board, thank you for the opportunity to report to you here today. I think just before I get into the presentation here, I wanted to reference back to Jay's presentation on this McMahon Company project. I think that's something that should be applauded. I think it really underscores something Jay has repeatedly been saying throughout this whole process, that this McMahon Company is and always has been working on ways to do the job best they can of delivering the water. And I've talked to Jay about it. I don't know if he's still here or not. He's right there. Yeah, there he is. I hope he gets the money. So I'm going to talk about the Bingham Groundwater District implementation of the 2024 mitigation plan, and how that's going and how we anticipate that it will go. Just to, anyway, so just to review what the 2024 mitigation plan means to the groundwater districts and how we comply with it. There's two basic components that we look at in this plan. There's a pumping reduction, there's a pumping limit that we have within the aquifer, and then there's a wet water mitigation. We call it a wet water mitigation obligation, which is just water to Twin Falls Canal Company in their time of need. So for Bingham Groundwater District, our piece of this plan limits our use within our district to 241,900 acre feet per year. And we have a 4-year block within it to use that our 4-year, multiply that by 4, we have 4 years to use that amount of water. About 148,000 acres in the district comes to about an average of 1.6 acre feet per acre, what our district is limited to on this. So just as an insight into how we handle this pumping limit in our district, in order to recognize priority dates within the district, but also recognize that all water rights, and I think the time that we're in right now, the announcement a couple of weeks ago with the updated methodology, all water rights in our district are at risk. And I think this priority system recognizes that. The table you see there shows how we assign this annual allocation to our members. So if your priority date lands between 1900 and 1950, you get 1.72 acre foot per acre, all the way down to 1.5 acre feet per acre for our most junior rights. It's a pretty narrow band there, but I think it does acknowledge that, given today, everybody in our district would be curtailed if not for this mitigation plan. So that's how we handle that allocation, pumping limit. And then with our wet water mitigation, the groundwater users as a whole are required to provide up to 75,000 acre feet of mitigation water in time of need water. Our groundwater district's portion of that is 17,647 acre feet. And every groundwater district is responsible to obtain their portion of that storage. I think that's really one of the things that's really important to note in this plan I think it was implicit in the previous settlement agreement that there was an individual compliance component, but it wasn't actually spelled out. And this plan spells that out so that an individual water user can comply individually and have individual safe harbor. And I think that was really important to put in there. The only caveat to that is the district as a whole is required to provide 17,000 acre feet. So that does land on the district to acquire that water. Right now, the only way we can acquire that mitigation water is through storage leases. And that's been a challenge, will continue to be a challenge in the future. It puts an additional burden on the storage system. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. One of the things that I think is really important for our district members is to understand how our actions impact the aquifer locally. You know, we see a lot of presentations that talk about the ESPA as a whole and what the overall health of the ESPA is, but we also know that there are local impacts on the aquifer, and there are local scales of interaction between the aquifer and the river, and one of those is basically what this water call is about. The Surface Water Coalition water call has to do with the fact that the area there on the map that you see where the American Falls Reservoir is, that's where their primary supply of water comes from for their natural flow water right. And obviously, some groundwater users are going to have a more direct, immediate impact on that than others. And given the location of our district, we recognize that we're on top of it. We're right there. And so our impacts are going to be a little bit more direct. One of the things that I've started monitoring within our district is a well that was part of the Sentinel well network. If you all remember the Sentinel wells from the settlement agreement. There's a well in Atomic City. It's the yellow triangle up there, outside of any of the irrigation within our groundwater district. And what's unique about this well is, for one thing, it's got telemetry on it. USGS has telemetry on that well. So I can get real-time water level measurements from that well. The other nice thing about that well that's somewhat unique on the ESPA is that there are monthly readings from that, monthly water level readings from that well dating all the way back to the 1950s. So it provides for some pretty unique analysis of how the aquifer has reacted in that area and how it's behaved over the years. And something that I'm trying to provide to the members of our groundwater district is that we do have a direct impact on that. And the response is not in decades or even years. The response is in days. The groundwater level pumping, you can see on the graph there on the left, that represents years in there. The green part represents the irrigation season part of the year. The yellow part represents the non-irrigation season, non-irrigation months. And you can see that at the beginning of every irrigation season, you see a reduction, a drop in the water level. And we're not talking about, a huge drop. The biggest drop you see on there in a really water-intensive year is a foot. So we're not talking a huge drop in aquifer levels, but you do see a noticeable drop there. And one of the things that I've been able to determine in looking at this is the level, the amount of the drop in the aquifer level corresponds pretty closely with the amount of water that's pumped out of the aquifer in that given year. And so we'll be able to see pretty clearly how the impact of our pumping limit, our pumping reductions and recharge efforts are going to impact the water level in the aquifer and help us to get to that stabilization point and maintain the, stop getting any lower in the aquifer. So this is something that I'm trying to implement so that we have a metric that doesn't say, we'll see what happens from your pumping reductions in 20 years or something like that. We have a pretty immediate metric there that can tell us how good of a job we're doing in maintaining that. And also can help us to understand the benefits of recharge and hopefully get us to the point where we can get things stabilized and hopefully be able to go in another direction. To that point, we've recently, with the help of the Water Resource Board, been able to acquire property to do a new recharge site. So this map shows basically the recharge capacity available in the district. The two smaller sites that are over there on the left-hand side of that map, that's what's already there. The Bond Road recharge site, which is what we're, I guess, calling that, the Bond Pond is, I don't know. That's the new recharge site, and we appreciate the help of the department, help of the Water Resource Board staff, and turning the wheels of government very quickly to get this thing done. And we're in the process of finalizing the acquisition of that property right now, closing on it. So that should dramatically increase our recharge capacity within our district immediately, just with what we can do there, and hopefully, we'll be able to develop even more capacity in that site. And as we've talked about before, the beautiful thing about that recharge site is we have two large canals, one on the north side and one on the south side of that recharge project. So we've got excellent inflow capacity there. We hope that the development of this will help with the aquifer levels, with the being able to meet the pumping limit and everything. And we're in the middle of year 2 of our 4-year block right now. And the 4-year block was intended to allow some flexibility. And that was a compromise that both sides came to, was to allow flexibility in that. One of the things that we will be stressing strongly in the off season between this season and next is that flexibility allows us to exceed our pumping limit in a given year. So if our average pumping limit is 1.6 acre-feet per acre, we can exceed that in a given year. Let's say we go up to 1.8 acre-feet per acre in a given year. That means that in a subsequent year, we have to have a 1.4 acre-feet per acre limit in our aquifer level. And that's something we're going to be stressing heavily at the end of this year. Yeah, we have the flexibility, but that comes with a cost. And so we have to make sure that we get that. Again, this recharge capacity is going to help immensely with that effort, because that can help us catch up and be able to replace any extra that we pumped out. The other thing we're working on right now in the district, we've got about 1,000 wells in the district with 1,000 flow meters. And a lot of those flow meters are in locations that are difficult, if not inaccessible, during the irrigation season. We have a requirement in this plan to read those flow meters monthly. And so not only for the inaccessibility issue, but also to be able to provide better information to our growers to help them understand where they're at with their water balances. We are putting telemetry on our system. And at this point, we've got just over 300 meters installed, and there's more going in as we speak. That we're putting those in as fast as we can to be able to comply with that next year. And I pointed out up there, we have 13 different brands of flow meters in our district. Primarily, there's 6 of them, but there's 13 different brands that we're working with. We've got a telemetry system that has to match those different brands. And that has been a bit of a challenge, but we're working through that. And we've got some good partners to work with. Once we get everything installed, this is our dashboard as it is right now, and we'll be revising this to add some more components to it, but we'll be able to see in real time how much water is being pumped in any given area and how much water has been pumped from that well that season. We're going to be adding a component here where an individual member can log in and see their own devices and be able to see where they're at within that year's allocation, within a 4-year allocation, and be able to have that information in real time so they can make some good planning based on that. The other thing that we're going to be adding with this is real-time monitoring of water levels in the aquifer. And so we're going to be installing multiple monitoring wells to look at the water level, the water table in real time. So not only are we going to see what the pumping is doing in real time, we'll see what the water table throughout the district is doing in real time. And a lot of this is just so we can get a better understanding. So we can really understand how our pumping impacts, when it impacts. And once we have a better understanding of that, then we have a better way of working closely with surface water users to understand how can we do things that help them more at their time of need and be able to get through these years. And you know, there was a question earlier, and it's a good question. How much water savings do we get out of different projects? And I've been doing water resource management. I've worked in water resources for a very long time. And that question always comes up. What's the water savings? How much water can we save? And we want to quantify that. But I guess another way to look at that would be if we have an irrigation season where we have a short supply of water and we have the tools to make it through that irrigation season with everybody staying whole, then my contention is, how much water do we save? All of it. We saved all of it. And I think that's kind of the one way we need to look at this, you know, is the water savings is one thing, but the objective is to ensure that we are able to deliver water to where it needs to be. Now I want to come back to the other side of this. Here we talked about the pumping limit. The other obligation that we have as groundwater users is to provide this water in time. And I talked about it's well known that the limitations we have with storage water supplies. When they're needed most is when they're going to be least available. And that's just inherent with that paradigm that we're in. And so we're trying to develop alternatives to this. And this was discussed in the negotiations of the plan last year. There is a provision in the mitigation plan to allow for alternative mitigation. And I want to talk just a little bit about what we're proposing and what we're investigating within our groundwater district to have an alternate to storage water for providing that water in time. I can't stress enough, you know, and Jay talked about this a little bit too, how critical it is that we have ways to get through, to bridge the short-term needs so that we can let these long-term projects, recharge, pumping limits, all these things, let them have their effect long-term, but we've still got to get these short-term bridges crossed. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in a minute, but it is critical that we identify ways to reliably come up with this mitigation water. So what we're looking at in our district, in Bingham Groundwater District, we're somewhat unique in that we have significant surface water resources in that area. A lot of this, the Bingham County area that was developed, you know, pre-1900. We have groundwater or surface water rights that were developed in the 1880s along that system in there. And these canal companies, like I said, they have very, very senior water rights. So the idea is we have groundwater rights within our district. That's all we have. And so how do we get groundwater to be able to provide surface water in time for the Surface Water Coalition users? This idea would say, let's take some groundwater acres out in the district. We reduce our groundwater acreage, irrigated acres in the district. And with that reduction, we move that groundwater usage to where a canal company is right now. So we're not increasing our groundwater pumping, but we're moving it to where a canal company is. And with that, now we can provide groundwater to those canal water users. What that does is it frees up this surface water right that we can now take the surface water right, which is very senior water right. A lot of these water rights are, you know, I've heard a date of about 1886 is kind of a magical date on the upper snake, where if you're prior to that date, you rarely lose your natural flow water right. And so the idea is we get a lot of these early water rights that never lose their priority date, and we provide that to the surface water flows at the time. And so that's an immediate relief of water when they need it. And it's a more meaningful reduction in groundwater usage. And that's always been a disparity that we've had, that, you know, if there are 1,000 acres that are in jeopardy in the surface water system, you've got to shut off way more than 1,000 acres of groundwater to get water to them. So this kind of closes that disparity a little bit where we can get more to a one-to-one comparison. It minimizes the impact on the storage system. So we reduce the stress on the storage system in the years when it most is needed. And provides an alternative, a reliable alternative for us to be able to use. And this is a graph of the Twin Falls Canal Company diversions. This is a year that I'm sure Jay would love to forget ever happened. This is the 2022 irrigation season. Twin Falls Canal Company users were severely cut back that year. And the way this project would work, the way this approach would work would be, if you look at this graph, this is the daily diversion of the canal company. What's dark blue is the natural flow part of their diversion, and what's light blue is what they're using storage. And so what this would effectively do is make the dark blue lines go higher. So they're using, on any given day, they'd be using less storage and more natural flow, which preserves their water supply further into the season and eliminates the need for them to have to go to those deep cuts in the system. We're working on this right now. There are challenges to it, obviously. It's a new idea. The surface water users that we want to get these water rights from are highly reluctant to go into anything that they think may jeopardize their water rights. So there's going to be a lot of challenges that we have to work through to get this to work, but I'm confident that it can. And so, getting through those challenges, I think, is feasible, but it will take some time to do that. And that's all I've got. If you have any questions?
Okay, board members, any questions for Alan? Brian?
Mr. Chairman, Al, so do you, I'm thinking that we had a proposal for 1 or 2 groundwater to surface water conversions in the Peoples or Aberdeen Springfield Canal area. Are those something that we're coming close to being online, or?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Brian, yes, those conversion projects are happening as fast as they can get done. Primarily in our district, those are individual projects, so the individuals are getting them done. But yeah, I mean, we're doing as many of those as possible. And I failed to put a slide or anything about that, but there are significant conversion projects going on and more planned for water users to be able to do.
And has our funding been adequate to encourage that program? Or?
It has, and I think one of the things that we're learning in that is being able to streamline how that funding comes to the growers. I think there's ways that we're going to be able to work with the Water Resource Board to streamline how that funding comes in, potentially coming through the district rather than going directly to individuals, and to facilitate anything like that.
Joanne?
Mr. Chair, I'm a little lost, and I just want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. Sorry.
That's fine.
That you're proposing that you fallow 5,000 acres and not use groundwater for those, but instead transfer the groundwater rights to surface water and let the surface water flow down?
So up to, I probably shouldn't have put numbers on there, but yes, that would be the idea. So you go out there and you take out 5,000 acres of groundwater rights, fallow them. However that happens, you take out 5,000 acres of existing groundwater right, and that is mitigation for groundwater right on a surface water system. Does that make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Follow-up question. So when would this would not be every year, it'd be in a year when you need to do mitigation? Or would it be every year that you would, because you may not know that you need to do mitigation until you've already planted the crop? And
Right. Right.
How would that work?
So in order for this to work, these would have to be off every year. There would have to be that many acres out all the time in order for this to work. Because we would need to be able to make that surface water right available. Some of the limitations that we also have, the surface water rights would be provided through a water supply bank lease of that surface water right. And right now, the only way we can do a water supply bank lease of the surface water right is to lease it for the entire year. So that would have to be available for the entire year. We can, so yes, they would have to be permanently out in order for the plan to work.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Alan. Appreciate the report. Next up, Bonneville Jefferson Groundwater District Field Trip Presentation. Brad Butters is going to come and maybe give us a little taste of what we're going to go see this afternoon.
Well, that way you'd like mostly?
Whatever you want to present, Brad.
I do not have anything.
I mean, if you've got some family photos of the whatever you got.
That could possibly be real scary, air and everything, I appreciate Mr. Chairman, board members, I appreciate the chance to be here today and hear different ideas and perspectives. Water is not my first forte, if you will. I spent 42 years in ag finance, and so you may feel some of that come over to my European Loan Committee rather than being a water board member. My apologies. I have to admit, though, that I have learned that if you can focus on 2 or 3 key things, the rest of it seems to fall into play. From my experience, those key things for water, at least for the Bonneville Jefferson, is we have to make sure that we're doing proper mitigation, which includes wet water and recharge. We've got to make sure that we stabilize the aquifer and we improve the reach gains. Those are necessary in order for this thing to work. And the third thing is that we've got to manage the resource. And if we don't manage the resource and we don't focus on the objectives, we probably won't be successful in the process. So we started this process after the stipulation agreement was signed in November by educating our patrons. And we talked about allocations, and we talked about measurement, and we talked about compliance. And Alan just talked about that, so I'm not going to reiterate those too much. But I'm going to tell you that at this point on our measurement, we are doing a manual measurement through Jackson Hicks, similar to what they've done down in some of the Magic Valley. We realize that telemetry is where we need to be. And we have one of our board members who is working with Ethos, and we have another board member who is working with Campbell Scientific. And we anticipate at some point we'll be having a request for funding for telemetry. And we know we'll have some for meters because last fall we also annexed approximately 10,000 acres that came in from the Raybould area. A lot of those people do not have meters, and so we are in the process of trying to facilitate and help make that happen for them. Naturally, when you go through this, it takes money, and so assessments are a part of it, and we added a new segment to our assessments this year, and we're now assessing for a infrastructure charge to help us in this process. As the agreement came together last fall, we felt like the most important thing that we could do to contribute to that challenge and balance process that we have to do to manage that equilibrium between needs and supply would be a recharge wells. And so we identified 3 key areas that we felt were pretty important to our district and have opportunities. And we were working through the permitting process. We had 1 permit in 1 area. And we were working on the permitting process and the discharge process from the river. And then we had the water quality issue hit in January and February. And that kind of derailed our process. And our goal was that we would be able to expand each of those 3 areas and hopefully have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 wells total. We drilled 1 of those, but we do, and we were able to kind of get a feel for what it would do. We were very positive with those results, the one that we had the drill permit for. And so we feel that that's still a positive thing, but we need to have that quality control factor so that we're put him in the right place and we're managing that properly. Because of that, we also realized that we needed to be more active in our inline canal recharge. And so we reached out this spring and probably had 12 to 15 different canals that we worked with in the event that we had a Milner spill. That spill came for a very short window. We worked with those canals and we felt very positive about those results. But it's not just the results for the recharge, it's the relationship that was so critical. Because here we are a little bit later down the line, and that didn't pan out for those canal companies like they anticipated. Bureau Reclamation and some of the differences and some of those calculations put some stress on that relationship. So we have to maintain that in order to make it where it's viable for them. Their benefit, needless to say, is that they have cash injection through their delivery that we pay for that helps them. And in many cases, all of them would say, we have projects that we want to do. We have things that we need to do. And this was a source of funding for them that was very beneficial. For us, it helps us with our recharge, needless to say. The other thing, though, is it helps us to also have communications and channels for our mitigation in the event we need storage water, whether it be for recharge or whether it be for delivery mitigation downriver. And it also helps us to identify some projects that perhaps could be beneficial for them. Many times they would take us for a little tour because we would say, we want to see your canal. We want to see where you divert and we want to see where it goes back to the river. Because we wanted to make sure it never went back to the river through a recharge process. And so that would give us an opportunity to look for opportunities and see if there's something out there that could be done. The canal companies are starting to realize that recharge could be a benefit to them, but it has to have some funding, and it has to have measurement, it has to have water delivery. One of the things that they did do this year, which I think you're familiar with, was, I guess everyone has their own different terminology for it, but it's kind of a flood irrigation recharge, if you will. They talk about gravelly soils, Jay did in some of his areas. There's areas in our district where those canals go, and if you can simply spread that water out, it's a great way to recharge. We saw some results that would be approximately 1.5 acre feet per acre per day. And when you look at that and then you compare that to the costs of some of the other recharge projects, that's very efficient so far as the delivery of water. Now there's other variables that have to be worked out, but the delivery of that was just simply spreading out the canal if you're outside of the growing season and outside of the irrigation season. Today we hope to be able to show you a few projects that we're working on. We're going to go visit the Osgood pipeline, and it is a diversion from the river that would take water west across I-15, and we would use those locations for either recharge wells and or soft conversions. And we'll show you some of the pros of being able to deliver out of the river versus delivering out of the canal, and some of the physical obstacles that have to be done in the process. The second thing that we want to show you this afternoon will be the Osgood Canal, and that is an existing system that was originated with the UNI Sugar Company, and it was diverted off of the New Sweden Canal, siphons underneath I-15, and then as the delivery, and that was done in the early 1900s. We looked at it on Monday. Their pumping systems are 120 years old and still operating. It's quite fascinating to see. But the beauty of that opportunity is that as we converted from flood irrigation to sprinkler irrigation, the capacity of that canal has been dropped. And so we have some internal capacity that perhaps we could expand in a cooperated, coordinated effort that would allow us to also do soft conversions and or recharge. So we'll show you that one. And then the last item that we'd like to show you today would be what we call the Porterville site, which has had a recharge well there for approximately 4 years. And then this last winter, 2 additional wells were added, and we can talk about and show you how those work. Challenges that we see in our district, and in no particular order, but recharge is critical in order to stabilize this process. In order to balance a budget, you can either increase income or you can decrease expenses. Jay's decreasing expenses. We're trying to increase income. We're trying to put more in, he's trying to take less out. That's a cooperative effort. That's a good thing. But in order to do that, we don't have a mile marker 31. We have multiple ways and multiple options that are not as big, and we have to explore all of those. And we have to always be flexible as to how we do that and what we do. So coming back to the recharge wells, our biggest factor is we've got to get past this quality question so that we know what we need to do in order to make adequate compliance and be able to make that a reliable resource for us. We have to make sure that I think that we need a business plan, mitigation plan for our businesses. Yesterday, we went to Idaho and to Anheuser-Busch. They are patrons in our district, and they are very supportive, and they have helped us out on numerous things, but they operate 24/7, and both of their industries are growing and increasing demand, and our mitigation plan doesn't really line up and fit. And so I know there's work done in the background to try to improve that. And the last thing is that with the recent curtailments, I think everybody in the valley knows what my phone number is now. And that's great. But one of those challenges is that we have many of those are small patrons. And that takes a lot of work for not very little return, if anything. And there may be an opportunity there as to ways we can figure out how to still help those people with the mitigation, but maybe do it in a way that's a little more efficient in the process. And who knows what that will look like. But in any event, we hope to make it a very positive afternoon and maybe fill in some of the gaps that we reached questions on. But I would certainly take any questions that you may have.
Okay, any questions for Brad about what Vaudeville Jefferson Groundwater District's doing or the tour we're going to go on this afternoon? Probably be a lot of questions this afternoon.
That's great.
Oh, Brian has one.
Just the same one I had for Al. So do you have some soft conversions that are currently operating?
We have some that were done. I know Brett Jensen had one with the Johnny Burr property, and I think that one is done, if I'm not mistaken. And then off of the Osgood Canal and the Osgood Pipeline, we would have some there. We don't have any beyond that, to my knowledge, Brian, that we're working on right now.
And were those funded with help from the Water Resource Board, or were those before?
Brett Jensen did have some funding from Water Resource Board. Yes. All righty, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Patton, are we down to non-action items?
We are, Mr. Chairman.
Board members, any non-action items we need to take up during the work session? Looks like we're there. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the work session.
So moves, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. I believe